the episode of the Pickside Podcast. My name is Moran, and I'm here with Jack Barteck. This is now episode 45, and in today's episode, we're going to talk about everything that happened in Week 12 pretty much. We're going to talk about Matt Patricia's firing, head coaching vacancies, which 5 and 6 team has the best shot to make the playoffs, and if Jared Goff is holding back the Rams, and if Aaron Rodgers has become underappreciated. Then we're going to finish off the show with NFL Pick'em Week 13 and our power rankings for Week 13 of the NFL as well. So, yeah, how you doing today, Jack?
I'm all right. It's gross out. It's pouring rain.
Yeah, it's bad. I know Riv is in here because of school. So, just you and I on the podcast today. And before we start, I have to press the record button on the camera.
And you said Riv not here because of school. And it's tough. End of the semester. I know that me and you were both dealing with it as well. Like that end of the semester work is always tough. So, Riv, we wish you were here, but you got to do what you got to do.
Yes, sir. So I finally pressed the record button on the camera. So I guess we can get right into our topics. So Matt Patricia got fired by the Detroit Lions. Him and Bob Quinn got fired. And I want to know your thoughts on it. What do you think is next for Detroit now?
This was the best news that the Lions fans could have possibly heard. And it's a multitude of reasons. And I know that you're going to get into some of it further than I can. But he just showed up and he had way too much bravado without performance to back it up. There are only so many guys in the league that can act the way that he acted when he came into the head coaching role. You look at it back when Rex Ryan came to the Jets. He acted like a jerk. There's no way around it. You saw it every week on Hard Knocks. But the fact of the matter is he came out and went to 2 straight back-to-back AFC championship games. Bill Belichick acts like a jerk in the media. But the fact of the matter is he's the greatest coach in NFL history, at least up there. So if you're going to act the way that Matt Patricia acted, coming in after Jim Caldwell, who had 3 out of the last 4 of his seasons were winning seasons, and you're going to talk about how the team was soft under him, and he was holding them back, and you're calling out players, you need to back that up as a coach, and it has to show in your performance. But the fact of the matter is he came in, never had a winning season, never made the playoffs, and forced out multiple players. Some of them not as good as others, but Glover Quinn, Golden Tate, Quandre Diggs, especially Darius Slay on top of all of them, were all forced out mainly because of him. And there were other players as well. And you saw the reaction on Twitter yesterday. It ignited the Detroit Lions Twitter world because all of these players that had played for him in the past and knew what kind of guy he was, they were happy for Lions fans because when players like Darius Slay leave the Lions under those circumstances, it's not because he wanted out of Detroit. He just couldn't play under Matt Patricia anymore. And it goes back to that training camp. They had the combined training camp practice with them and the Giants, and him and Darius Slay got into a fight. Darius Slay leaves the field and then posts a picture of him and Odell training. And then Matt Patricia comes back the next day and shows the picture on the whiteboard and embarrasses him in front of the entire team. It's just not the way that you run a team.
I mean, part of Matt Patricia's problem is that, and part of the Lions' problem is that they try to do what the Patriots did. They got Bob Quinn. They got Matt Patricia in there, but they're not as good as Belichick and never will be. The problem with Matt Patricia is that he wanted to be a hard-nosed coach, but he doesn't have that credibility to do that. There are certain guys that can do that. You can go in and you can kind of bully players and stand your ground as a coach if you've played in the NFL before. Like a guy like Robert Saleh can get away with it, but a short guy that's chubby like Matt Patricia, he doesn't look like he's a very tough guy. Like you can't get away with trying to punk these athletes because they know what's up, you know? So Matt Patricia tried to do too much of that. I mean, his record shows for itself. 13-29-1 as the coach. Before he got there, they were 9-7 both years. That's a bad move by Bob Quinn to fire Jim Caldwell.
And he was a well-liked and respected guy, Jim Caldwell.
Yeah, exactly. So that was a bad move by Bob Quinn. But then you look at Detroit Lions, like you look at Matt Patricia. He got hired in Detroit for being a defensive coach, defensive mastermind. It's easy to do it when you're with Bill Belichick and you have all the players to do it. But then in Detroit, in 2018, they finished 10th in yards. They finished 16th in points, 2019, 31st in yards, 26th in points. And this year, they're 29th in yards and 31st in points. And I don't know if anybody has ever looked at Detroit's defensive roster, but it's not bad. It's not this bad. They should be a top 15 defense in the NFL. And if they get a coach that's better, they would have been. They would have been. But Patricia's just not that guy. And you talked about former players calling him out. I mean, the former Detroit Lions tight end Garrett Hudson said that Patricia was the worst person that he's ever met. That he's ever met.
Oh
and I can't name my sources, but I have sources that used to play for Patricia, and they do not like him. The practices are rough. He's a mean guy. He's mean spirited. I mean, there were guys that when they practiced, they wouldn't even be ready for the games. Their legs would be done up for the games because Patricia's practices were so brutal. I mean, in the NFL, you just can't do that. You have to prioritize rest. These are professional athletes. They're not high schoolers. And when you come in as a grown man and you try to punk other grown men, you see what happens. It's not going to work, and nobody's going to respect that.
Yeah, and you said it, as a defensive head coach, to come in and be as bad defensively as the Lions were under him, it's inexcusable. And I know the one game that we watched single-handedly be a microcosm of what the Lions have been under him, the Jets, in Sam Darnold's opener. It was against a rookie quarterback, his first ever NFL start, and Matt Patricia was coming in these big expectations. They get the pick six, and then everything went downhill from there. It was arguably the best performance of Sam Darnold's career on that Monday. I believe it was Monday Night Football. And since then, it's been no better. And you said it, they have talent in the building. You look at them this year, they're sitting at 4-7. They could easily be in the playoff conversation with the right coach.
They've blown about 4 games that they've had double-digit leads in. I mean, you look at their defense, I don't think they're a bad squad. You have Desmond Trufant, who was a really good cornerback in his day, and I think he shows flashes of it. Justin Coleman, he's a good nickelback. Who's the guy? Jeff Okudah, the 3rd overall pick.
Yeah.
Trey Flowers, he's a good edge rusher. Danny Shelton, he's not bad. Jamie Collins coming off the edge. Like, these guys aren't horrible. Deron Harmon they have too. Like, the guys that they have aren't horrible to be the 31st ranked defense in the NFL. It's just ridiculous.
Yeah, and that's another thing. You brought up a guy in Jeff Okudah who, coming out of school, was supposed to be one of the best cornerback prospects in recent memory. He was by far the best cornerback in college football last season and probably the season before, and he's coming to the NFL, and I get it. It's a tough position to adjust to at the NFL level, but he has been one of the worst cornerbacks in the league this season. And under a defensive head coach, that should not happen. Talent should develop under him. And not only has Okudah been bad, he hasn't developed at all. He hasn't gotten better over the course of the season. So something is wrong there.
Well, we've talked about Matt Patricia, but the guy that can't go unnoticed is Bob Quinn. I mean, one, you fired Jim Caldwell after he gives you 2 9-7 seasons. You choose to pull the trigger and fire him. And Jim Caldwell actually talked to a reporter and said that he was trying to fire him, I believe, in 2016. Like, the year that he first came in, he was trying to fire Jim Caldwell. But you look at Bob Quinn. Stephen Tulloch went on Twitter and even said that he loves that Bob Quinn and Patricia got fired, that Detroit deserves better. Eric Ebron tweeted about it, and he's like, I might give Bob Quinn a call and wish him well. And then just his draft has been abysmal. Not too bad, but there was this one draft where he drafted Gerard Davis, a middle linebacker, with the first round pick. Then his second round pick was Tease Tabor out of Florida. Both of them were busts. And now, just recent memory, he drafted Jelani Tavai, who is not, like, I thought he showed some flashes his rookie season, but he has not panned out so far. I think it's mostly coaching because I think he has some potential and talent. But even at the time, people said that he drafted Tavai way too high in the draft.
Yeah. And the problem is Quinn had catered to Matt Patricia for the past 3 years. It had always been Patricia first, especially when it comes to a guy like Darius Slay, who is one of the best corners in football. And you side with Matt Patricia, who hasn't shown you anything, over Darius Slay. It just goes to show you what side he's on. And at that point, if Matt Patricia's going, you might as well clean house and start over.
Yeah, I just feel like what's next for Detroit is they got to bring in a good head coach. First things first. I really don't think I think the talent is there. Like, this team is a playoff team. I really believe that. Matthew Stafford, I think, is still a great quarterback. And they pretty much just wasted about 4 years of his prime.
Yeah.
Because he he's a hell of a quarterback, and he's never been put in a situation to succeed and to have sustainable success. So I hope that the Lions bring in a good coach, a good manager, and they finally get this thing right for Detroit. They just need somebody that can uplift the team and get their defense better. Because if that defense is average, Detroit is a playoff team, and there's no doubt about it.
Yeah, and if you got to feel bad for Matthew Stafford, who has been painfully underrated for pretty much his entire career, because what has he been really surrounded by in Detroit other than Calvin Johnson? You know, they've had some nice pieces, but they've never given him that full coaching, defense, offensive weapons. The offensive line has never been that great. So, like, I feel like we've never gotten to see what Matthew Stafford really is. And now the question is, did they wait too long? Have they wasted too much of him? And with a new head coach coming in, are they going to want to move on from Matthew Stafford? It's a lot of question marks, and they've put themselves in a not great position just because where Matthew Stafford is at right now, I feel like he's on the tail end of at least the tail end of his prime, if not the tail end of his career. So it's going to be interesting to see who comes in and what decisions they make. Do they think they can still win with Stafford immediately? And if so, then you got to step on it and make moves to make it a quick turnaround.
Yeah, I agree. Can you just do me a favor and can you lower the headphones, the number one? No, the knob right there, the knob. Yeah, can you lower it to the left? Yeah, I think that's good.
Is that good?
Yeah, because my headphones are way too loud. All right, so now we're gonna go into our second topic. Which team do you believe is the most attractive head coaching destination? What team right now that has a head coaching vacancy or that will have one soon, do you think head coaches or coaches should be looking to become the coach of that team? I mean, I'll just name you some off the bat. Falcons have an opening. The Texans probably are going to have an opening. The Jets are probably going to have an opening. The Chargers as well. And the Lions. I mean, which team do you think is the most attractive destination?
Well, we spoke about this a little bit the other day, and the first team that I want to say is the Houston Texans, just because anytime a quarterback like Deshaun Watson is available to coach, you have to be wanting to jump at that opportunity. But when you look further into it, the fact that they've given up so much draft capital in the past few years and given up great players for less than their worth, it's really hurt them. Their cap is not in a great situation. So as much as I want to say them because of Deshaun Watson, I just can't lean towards that. The team that I would say would be the Los Angeles Chargers. You have Justin Herbert, who's having one of, if not the greatest season of all time for a quarterback in the National Football League history. And he's only going to get better, you'd have to imagine. And then you have a lot of talent on this roster. It starts with the wide receiving core, who Keenan Allen and Mike Williams are both painfully underrated. Then you have Hunter Henry. He's going to be due for a contract this offseason, but I'm sure they'll pay him. He's done a very nice job since he got drafted there. Austin Eckler is another guy in that offense. And the offensive line hasn't been terrible. It's not the best group, but they can work with it. And then on the defensive side of the ball, where they have been really miserable this year, they actually have a lot of talent. It's just, one, the coaching has been really bad, and two, they've dealt with a lot of injuries, starting with Derwin James, who is, up for debate, the best safety in the league. He's been injured pretty much the last 2 seasons. They have Melvin Ingram, who is another guy up for a contract. He's been out this season. Then they have Joey Bosa, of course. You know what he's done since being drafted. Kenneth Murray is another guy they drafted in the first round last year, has a lot of potential, not having the best season. Denzel Perryman is a big piece of that defense. So they have the guys on defense to have a good unit. They're just not coached well, and it shows. It's very obvious. Then going into this offseason, they have the 8th most cap room, and they also have the 6th best draft capital. So they got the whole package. They got the quarterback figured out. They have the talent to work with. They have the money this offseason and the draft capital. So I don't see how you could pass up on that destination.
My pick is the Chargers as well, but before I go into them, I'm going to go into why the other teams are not the most attractive destination. First, you have the Jets. Yes, they might get Trevor Lawrence, but Trevor Lawrence, as good as people project him to be, is still an unknown. I'd rather go with a quarterback that is known. Justin Herbert, he's probably going to be good. Deshaun Watson, he's good. So that's why the Jets aren't an attractive situation to me, because they've been dysfunctional for a long time. And it's still a question mark at the quarterback position. The Lions and the Falcons, they have old quarterbacks that aren't mobile. The league is moving away from that. So if I'm a coach, I don't want to go there. And then you have the Texans. They don't have cap space. They only don't have draft capital this upcoming year. Next year, they have all their picks back, so they're going to be fine. It's just this offseason, they're not going to have draft capital. So I'm not worried about that. But it's the cap space situation. The Chargers are my pick because, like you said, they have the quarterback position figured out. And while I do disagree with you with your point about the offensive line, because the offensive line has been abysmal. I was watching the game yesterday versus the Bills. I don't know the exact number, but I'm pretty sure Justin Herbert got pressure on 80% of the snaps. Like they don't have an offensive line at all. Their offensive line is abysmal. The good news is that right now Mike Pouncey is injured. It's not good that he's injured, but when he comes back, they'll be good. Brian Bulaga has been out. Yeah. So when you have the trio of Bulaga, Try Turner, and Mike Pouncey, that offensive line is going to be better. They need to draft a left tackle. If they get a high enough pick, maybe they can get Penny Sewell from Oregon, Justin Herbert's former teammate. But yeah, their offensive line has been abysmal. They have to fix that. But everything you said is on point. Like their defense is good. Derwin James, hopefully he's healthy. Casey Hayward, Melvin Ingram, Joey Bosa. They have a defensive line. They have a secondary. Their linebackers are iffy. And then they have receivers. They have a tight end. They have a running back. So they have the full package.
Yeah.
And like right now, I remember I was watching the Chargers game yesterday, and you talked about the horrible coaching. I don't know why the Chargers love to run on first down so much and like inside zones. The play calling is so predictable. But what really worried me was a play I saw late in the game where Justin Herbert completed a Hail Mary, and instead of passing it on first and goal with about less than a minute left, they run the ball. And then later on in that basically play sequence, or like in the next two plays, they go for a QB sneak, and the pass and the protection is going in a pass pro. So the coaching, play calling has been horrible. I think they are the most attractive head coaching destination, but this is going to be a hot take. I don't think the coach should be Eric Bieniemy.
Really?
No, I don't think they should go with an offensive coach. I think they should go with
that's fair.
They should go with the defensive coach because that's been their problem. And also, I think offensive head coaches are kind of overrated. Everybody loves to talk about Andy Reid's coaching tree, but it's kind of an overrated coaching tree. If I'm being honest, like outside of Doug Peterson, nobody has really succeeded who's been an OC for Andy Reid. You look at Matt Nagy is one of them, right? Matt Nagy is one of them. Pat Shurmur, Brad Childress. The Andy Reid successful coaches, the coaches that have been successful from Andy Reid's coaching tree have been John Harbaugh, special teams coordinator, Ron Rivera, defensive coordinator, and Sean McDermott, defensive coordinator. The only one who's been successful has been Doug Peterson, and right now he's having problems in Philadelphia. So do I trust Eric Bieniemy, who so far, all we know is that he can coach extraordinary talent really well, to go to the Chargers? My guy is Robert Saleh. I like his energy. I like his passion. I think he should be the next head coach for the Chargers, Robert Saleh.
And as much as I do think Bieniemy can be a great head coach, I agree with your point that a defensive head coach would make more sense for the Chargers, just because I think that defensive unit needs more work and care and consideration than the offensive unit. You know, I think that working with Pep Hamilton, Herbert has grown so much, and I think that offensive unit is more ready. And I think it's easier to bring in an offensive coordinator than bring in a head coach to run the offense and then figure out the defensive coordinator.
But I'm pretty sure that the Chargers will probably bring in an OC as their head coach, because that's kind of like the trend right now when you have a rookie quarterback going into their second year. Oh, get an offensive coordinator and they'll take an MVP leap. If they do bring one, I don't know if he's free on the market, but I would bring in Joe Brady. Joe Brady would be my guy. I'd pick him over Eric Bieniemy. That's just me. I'd pick Joe Brady. But like I said, I'm going with Robert Saleh first.
And before we come to the end of the segment, I did want to say about the Jets, I feel like, and maybe this is a biased take because, again, I'm obviously a Jet fan, but I think that out of all of those destinations, the Jets would be the second most attractive out of any of them, because you look at them Trevor Lawrence, as much as he's an unknown, he's the first quarterback since PFF started collecting data to have a 90-plus grade in 3 college seasons. He's the most highly touted quarterback coming out of college since Peyton Manning, maybe Andrew Luck. But the fact of the matter is anybody would salivate over having that talent at quarterback. And then on top of that, they have $80 million in cap space this offseason. They have the number 1 draft capital this year. And I'm not sure about next year, but I'm sure they'll be at least up there on that list next year with a couple of the moves they've made to pick up some picks. And they have some talent on the roster too. I know it hasn't shown this year. They've been miserable, but I think a lot of that has to do with the coaching. And I think there are some gems on that roster that may not be playing up to their potential, but I don't think that this is an unsalvageable roster. I think there are pieces to build around in there, but obviously behind the Chargers, I think that the Jets would be the second most attractive destination.
Mm-hmm. Now, off the subject of head coaching destinations, we're going to go into games that happen in week 12. The first game we're going to go into is the Titans-Colts. It was the 1 p.m. game, so that's what we're going to do first. So what went wrong for the Colts and what went right for the Titans?
Well, I'll tell you one thing for the Colts. Missing DeForest Buckner was a huge loss because they just got destroyed in the run game. And at the end of the day, when you can't stop Derrick Henry, it's going to be very tough to stop the Titans. And I think that we've seen over the past year or so, if you force the Titans to beat you with Ryan Tannehill, you're much more likely to beat them than if you force them to beat, or you don't force them to beat you without Derrick Henry. Like if you can cut off the head of the snake, you have a better chance of killing the snake. And the Colts did not do that. And we've said it time and time again on this podcast, and we talked about it last week. I just don't trust that Colts offense in a shootout. I don't trust Phillip Rivers. I don't think that he has that firepower anymore. It's the reason that I can't put them up there with the Chiefs. And that's what happened. They ended up not being able to score with the Titans, and it really hurt them that they did not have DeForest Buckner because that line was weakened.
What went right for the Titans is that Derrick Henry came up big, and I think playoff Derrick Henry is a thing. In the playoffs, he was completely unstoppable, and whenever I see a performance like this from Derrick Henry, I call him playoff Derrick Henry because I think that's a thing. In the second half of the season, for some reason, he just goes beast mode. You know, shout out to Marshawn Lynch. But what went wrong for the Colts is that DeForest Buckner was out and Danico Autry were out, their best 2 run stoppers. Yeah. You know, without them, their defense is completely different. Even though Matt Eberflus has done a great job, there's a reason they traded a first-round pick for DeForest Buckner.
And he's been worth it.
They needed an interior lineman, and they got it in him. So that's what went wrong. I knew the Titans were going to win this game because usually division games split. The Colts won the first one. But I think what also went right for the Titans is that they used Derrick Henry to their advantage. And I'm actually glad they did this time around because usually the Titans become predictable. They run the ball. They keep running it. They run it a lot on first down. But in this game, they were doing a lot of play action passing, like a lot throughout the game, a lot. Derrick Henry got a touchdown counted for his rushing stats. But if you watch the game, it wasn't like that. Ryan Tannehill threw a screen pass to him, basically like a swing pass, and they called it a lateral. But it was basically a pass, and Derrick Henry took it in. But the play action was setting up the run the entire game and vice versa. The Colts could not stop it. They couldn't adjust. When they tried to adjust to the play action passing, the Titans started running it, and Derrick Henry was just gushing them for 10 to 8 to 10 yards, and you couldn't stop it. I mean, Derrick Henry had 140 yards and 3 touchdowns in the first half. Like those stats are crazy just to even think about.
Yeah. And we've seen it since the last postseason. If you can't stop Derrick Henry, you can't stop the Titans. You know, there has not been games where he's had a huge game if they've lost. It just doesn't happen. And the question is, can you stop him? Can you not stop him? And the Colts did not do that. I wouldn't put too much stock into it because, again, they were missing their 2 best run stoppers, and they will get them back. So it's not something where I'm looking at it and I'm saying, you know, this is the Colts' true colors. They're done. But they need to get DeForest Buckner back quickly, figure out that defensive line again, and they'll be fine.
I also don't think that Phillip Rivers necessarily doesn't have enough firepower. I think this offense doesn't have enough firepower.
Yeah, their receivers.
I mean, their running backs aren't like Marlon Mack, even though he has some moments where he flashes that he can be a 3-down back. He's more of a third down receiving back, and he's very explosive in that role. Then their receivers aren't very good. People still like to view T.Y. Hilton as a number one. T.Y. Hilton is not that guy anymore. He's 5'10". He's small. He doesn't have much like body mass to him, and he came into the league as a burner. He ran a 4.34 at the combine. He's had a lot of injuries, so he doesn't have that speed anymore to get by people. When you're younger, you can use that to your advantage. It works in your favor. When you get older, you have to be more technically skilled, and it just hasn't been the case. Last year, he had 500 yards receiving in 10 games. This year, he has 400 in 10 games. He hasn't been a number one, so you're counting on basically Zach Pascal and Michael Pittman Jr., who's a rookie.
He's been dealing with injuries too.
And their other speedster wide receiver, Paris Campbell, is out for the year. In the beginning of the year, he was out. So, they don't have a fully healthy receiving core, so there isn't enough firepower to even score a lot of points, which is why the formula for the Colts' success is to keep the game at a low score, and hopefully they can score enough points to win. They're not as bad, but they're similar. They're like the Chicago Bears of the AFC. They have a great defense, but their offense, there's a lot of question marks about it, even though the Chicago Bears offense is way worse. And the play calling is way worse.
I was just going to say, it's like the Bears with much better coaching.
Yeah, exactly. But the point holds true. They can't score enough points. They have to have their defense bail them out. And that's why, when Phillip Rivers first went to the Colts, I said this. I said that he's kind of going into like a yin-yang situation. In the Colts, great receivers, no O-line. In the Colts, in the Chargers, great receivers, no O-line. With the Colts, a great O-line, no receivers. So he's basically kind of working with the same thing. He's just not getting hit.
Yeah, and one way or another, I feel like a lot of people don't consider how much great receivers do for a quarterback. Like, getting separation can be the difference between a quarterback looking great and looking horrible. And you saw, I feel like the Chargers were able to develop much more explosive plays last year with Phillip Rivers, and obviously now with Justin Herbert. And the Colts have not been able to do that this season because they just don't have the personnel for that. Their best plays have really come out of the backfield, even though their running backs aren't great on, short passes and stuff like that. That's been their best offense. And at the end of the day, that's not going to cut it against these, higher power offenses in the AFC.
Yeah, a game that happened is Miami versus the Jets. The Dolphins beat them 20-3, but we're not going to talk about the game itself. We're just going to talk about a storyline within the game. Fitzpatrick got the start. He won. So the question is, who do you think gives the Dolphins a better chance to make the playoffs? Ryan Fitzpatrick or Tua? And also another question, just like kind of the same question, who do you think they can go farther with as well if they do make it to the playoffs, Fitz or Tua?
Well, one of my biggest issues is when we were talking about Tua, I think it was last episode. It might have been 2 episodes ago. And we were talking about how he could, it was after the Cardinals game, I think. And I said he would have a little springboard here with the Chargers and then the Broncos and then the Jets. But what really happens is he gets pulled against the Broncos. He's hurt in the Jets game. Is he going to be back for the Bengals game next week? He's more than likely going to be, but are they going to start him? Now the question marks are swirling, and this game that was supposed to be the third of a 3-game stretch of a trampoline for him going into 4 tough matchups down the stretch, now he doesn't have that anymore. Now he has to go out against Cincinnati, maybe pressing, trying to prove himself, and then he gets greeted with the Chiefs, the Patriots, the Raiders, the Bills to close the season. So that's a concern for me with Tua right now. And as much as I said that I've been okay with him so far, we both agreed he has not been anything special. He's been a game manager in the games he's played so far. And I think that that's okay based on his circumstances, not having played a football. We disagree on this. Not having played a football game in almost a year, not having OTAs, training camp, whatever, to adjust to that offense. I understood it. But when it comes down to a playoff hunt, especially as tight as it is in the AFC, I don't know that you can afford to have that. Even as great as their defense has been, you can't be conservative with your play calling because you don't trust your quarterback or whatever it may be to call the plays that you would with Ryan Fitzpatrick, a quarterback. And That's why, as much as I like Tua and I feel like he's been okay, that game that he got pulled and missed game against the Jets is a huge setback for them wanting to play Tua the rest of the season. I think they're going to go with Tua against the Bengals, but I think that when you discuss who would be best for them down the stretch, it might be Ryan Fitzpatrick. We know, we saw him with the Jets. He's as wild card as they come, and he will win you football games or lose you football games. But I think they need to bet on that rather than the conservative play calling and conservative offense they've been using with Tua.
I think what I'm about to say is gonna make people think that I'm kind of backtracking on my statement, but I'm gonna make it clear. Tua's nothing special, and I don't think he will be anything special. I, in fact, don't even think he'll be the Dolphins franchise quarterback. That's going to be the position they're gonna need the most, and he's not gonna deliver on that. With that being said, the reason they need to stay with Tua is because I disagree with all your points. I don't think the Dolphins need a playmaker. I think Ryan Fitzpatrick is a better playmaker. I mean, he averages over 100 yards per game passing, right? I think he's a better playmaker. He's a better leader. He brings more passion to the team. But with that being said, I think the Dolphins are in a position where they can't afford a Ryan Fitzpatrick, because throughout his career, he's either been a great performer or he'll lose you a game. I mean, he wasn't great against the Jets. The Jets just can't score.
Yeah.
But they had turnovers that we could have capitalized on. We just couldn't score.
Yeah, and my answer was no basis on the Jets game.
And the thing about it is that the Dolphins have a great defense. They have great coaching. They have a great special teams unit. They don't need a quarterback who's going to be a gunslinger and cost the team some drives. They don't need a quarterback who's going to take risks. They need a quarterback like Tua who's going to hold on to the ball. He'll take care of it. He's thrown for 6 touchdowns, 0 picks. Ryan Fitzpatrick has thrown for 12 touchdowns, 8 picks. So there's a big disparity there. They don't need a playmaker like Fitzpatrick. They don't need a quarterback that's going to want to hit the team on his back and play hero ball. They just need a guy like Tua. Throw these little screens, throw these little slants. They don't need nothing special. And that's why I think Tua is the guy moving forward for them if they want to have a better shot at not only securing a playoff spot, but maybe going above the Bills and winning the AFC East. They need Tua to be there because he's going to protect the ball.
The reason I disagree with you there is because the teams that they're going to have to be facing, and I agree their defense is a top 5 unit in football. I think that's fair to say. But the teams that they're going to be facing, obviously the Bengals are a wash. At least I would hope so. Then you have the Chiefs. That's a high-powered offense. The Patriots, not as much, but you never know with Cam Newton. But then the Raiders can score the football with the best of them, and so can the Bills. And they need pretty much at least 4 out of the next 5 games that they really want a shot at the playoffs the way that this race is shaping out. If they had put themselves in a better position at the start of the season, or if they had beaten the Broncos, I might feel differently. But I don't think that you can sit on your hands and play conservative when you don't really control your own destiny at this point. You need everything you can get.
You talk about those teams, the Raiders and Bills, being teams that can score with the best of them. But no team has been able to score with the Dolphins. I mean, they're second in points allowed. So they're not letting any team come in and score a bunch of points on them, which is why I feel like you don't need Fitzpatrick to come in and throw for 3 touchdowns. That's why Tua's been winning, not even throwing for 100 yards, because you don't need that. The Dolphins don't need that. And at the same time, I guess you can use a narrative that, they're developing him as well. But I don't think they need a guy like Fitzpatrick because we've seen it firsthand with the Jets. He cost us a playoff spot.
Oh, yeah. I'm the first to admit he's a wild card.
He threw 3 interceptions, I think, or 4 that game. It was 3 or 4. But he had an abysmal game when we were supposed to make the playoffs that year, and he cost us that shot. That's what Fitzpatrick is. He can either win you games or he can lose you games. And for the Dolphins, they can't afford that right now. They need somebody who's going to take care of the ball, and they know what they're going to get out of them.
I understand where you're coming from. Again, I just feel like the teams that they're playing, especially a team like the Chiefs and other teams that are at the top of that AFC race, or the bottom of that AFC race, I should say, because that's where they're going to be battling. Either way, whoever they end up starting, the defense is going to be the key. And if the defense plays well, I agree with you. Tua is the guy. But do you trust the Miami defense to hold the Chiefs offense like that?
The Chiefs?
Like, so if you're playing a team like the Chiefs, because they're going to face the Chiefs not this upcoming week, but the week after, do you trust the Miami defense against the Chiefs and Tua at the helm against the Chiefs defense?
I don't trust any team against the Chief, any defense.
Fair.
But what I'm going to say about that is that while that's a valid point, I think the Dolphins just need to win 2 games and they secure a playoff spot. I think
Really?
they get to 9 wins. They're in the playoffs. I don't think, you have the Raiders there who are in the hunt still, right? And that's about it. The Raiders.
Well, the Raiders, the Colts, the Ravens,
but who's out
the
of
Patriots,
who's
the Browns,
who's out of the playoffs right now?
the Jets, the Jaguars, the
the teams that
matter.
matter.
I guess the Broncos and Texans would be the only one. I mean,
they're not making it.
The Patriots are at 5 wins.
They're not going to make it either.
And then beyond that, I think that the Raiders, the Ravens, the Colts, the Dolphins, the Browns.
But who's out of the playoffs right now? Like, there's 7 teams that are in right now.
Oh, the 7 teams that are in are obviously the Steelers, the Chiefs, the Titans, the Bills. Those are your division winners. Then you have the Browns, the Dolphins, the Colts. So and the Ravens and Raiders are the 2 teams that aren't.
Okay, so I feel like the only threat is the Ravens. I don't think the Raiders are making it. The Ravens are the only threat, and they have a COVID situation. So who knows what's going to happen from that. But if the Ravens lose, that gives the Dolphins a front row seat, basically, to the playoffs if they lose to the Steelers on Wednesday.
Yeah, and you make a good point there. And a lot depends on circumstance. If things work out in their favor and the defense can be really good and other teams help them out with losses, yes. But with them not having their spots solidified, like them not controlling their own destiny, they can't afford a loss as much as I feel like they could when they had Tua starting in the middle of the season. As cliche as that might sound, going down the stretch. And it's tough to say Ryan Fitzpatrick just because we watched him with the Jets below the playoffs for him, and he has that in him, but then he also has sparks of greatness. The defense is the key, no matter what. No matter who they have at quarterback, that defense will be what will even give them a chance to make the playoffs, let alone win playoff games. But I think that they should go with Tua. As much as I'm saying I think Ryan Fitzpatrick makes more sense, I think they should go with Tua, because if you don't go with Tua after starting him for 3 games in the middle of the season, you're showing no confidence in him. And then how do you really expect him to bounce back from that next year, showing that you don't believe in him in a playoff race? And at that point, you might as well just draft a new quarterback. So I think they should go Tua, but part of me feels like Ryan Fitzpatrick gives them a better chance in games where they're going to need a high-powered offense. And it comes down to the defense. Can the defense keep them in it enough that a conservative offense works? It's a risky bet.
You talked about the Dolphins facing the Chiefs in a couple of weeks. The Chiefs played yesterday at 4:15 against the Bucs. And what do you think of the game? I mean, do you think the Bucs were just bad, or are you not sold on them anymore? Or are the Chiefs just that dominant? What's your opinion on it?
The Chiefs are too dominant. Me and Riv have been saying it for weeks. Actually, Riv didn't say it last week, which amazed me, but I've had the Chiefs at the top of my power rankings for weeks now. Ever since last year, I think it's been clear they're the best team in the league, and 1 loss to the Raiders did not change my opinion on that. They are an unstoppable offensive unit, and until somebody proves otherwise to me, I can't pick against them. And you saw it again on Sunday. The Bucs are a good defensive team, although they came out in one of the most ridiculous defenses I've ever seen. I don't know what Todd Bowles is thinking, and we gave him a lot of credit this year, but to play single coverage with no safety help over the top on Tyreek Hill is a death wish. And Patrick Mahomes said it. He said it was single coverage with no one over the top, and we don't see that almost at all. So to be doing that, I did not understand that move at all. And then in the second half, when the Buccaneers switched to a different coverage, they slowed down the Chiefs offense a little bit, but it goes back to the Raiders game last week. When they got the ball with 1.5 minutes left down by a score, I felt nothing but confidence that they were going to win the game, and there's no other team in football that I would feel that way about. I just feel like they are that dominant that it would take a perfect performance to take them down. And do I think it can happen? 100%, because football, it's any given Sunday. If you go out and have a great performance, it can. The Titans last year did not really belong where they ended up in the AFC Championship. They just strung together a couple of great performances. It can happen 100%, but the Chiefs should win it all this year.
The Chiefs are dominant, but this was more about the Bucs not being in sync yet. And everybody's wondering what's wrong with the Bucs, what's wrong with Arians, what's wrong with Tom Brady. I'm gonna tell you, everybody is watching right now. I'm gonna tell you that what's wrong with them is that it's their first year in a brand new offense. Bruce Arians' offensive system is one of the most complicated in the NFL. Carson Palmer, you remember him, former Bengals quarterback. He went to the Cardinals late in his career after his stint with Oakland. So Carson Palmer's first year with Bruce Arians, he threw 24 touchdowns and 22 interceptions. The Cardinals luckily went 10-6 that year. Palmer the next year in 2014, which he only played 6 games, he went 6-0. But I'm going to use 2014 and 2015 combined. He had a 19-3 record, threw 46 touchdowns and 14 picks. In 2 seasons, he threw less picks than his first season with Arians. Bruce Arians' system takes time. And for Tom Brady, who didn't have an offseason, didn't have OTAs, Mike Evans, they didn't have time to get in sync. They're not ready yet. They're not there yet. It's only week 12. People feel like it's been forever. Week 12 is 3 months basically.
With no training camps, no OTAs,
and
no
COVID,
preseason.
which makes it even harder to practice and stuff. So there's so much that's tying into this. And they went out and signed Antonio Brown. I personally feel like the Bucs, while their ceiling is higher with Antonio Brown, they are better with Scotty Miller.
It's just another puzzle piece.
It's not even that. It's that Tom Brady is familiar with Scotty Miller.
Yeah, exactly.
They've been in the offense. He's familiar. He knows where he's going to be somewhat. When Evans and Godwin weren't in the lineup, Scotty Miller was there, and they were building chemistry. So they worked really, really well together. So when you bring in a guy like Antonio Brown, who doesn't know the system, it's going to look funky to begin with. And like Tom Brady threw 3 interceptions in the third quarter. One came after a huge completion to Godwin, and the second one was just like a tip that bounced up. After that play, Tony Romo basically made a comment about how it was Mike Evans' fault because he didn't read the blitzer, and everybody on Twitter went wild. They called Tony Romo, he's just sucking up to Tom Brady. He's a homer, he's whatever. But in reality, Tony Romo said that because he understands the position. He understands what Tom Brady's seeing, what the normal fan isn't seeing. So many fans and even people in the mainstream media, which I don't even watch any of the mainstream media shows because they don't offer anything they don't offer any knowledge about the game. They just talk. They're entertainers. They think it's just throw and catch. It's as simple as throw and catch. But there's so much scheme behind football. There's so much understanding that has to go into it that you can't just look at a play and blame it all on a guy. Part of this is just people not liking Tom Brady and wanting him to fail at all costs.
Yeah. And you spoke about this a little bit on your Instagram story before, but the Buccaneers run one of the most wide receiver read heavy offenses in football. If you don't know what that means, it means the wide receiver has multiple routes and they have to read the defense. So if it looks like on tape, there's been a lot of miscommunications between Tom Brady and his receivers this year, that's because that's what it is. And there are multiple occasions on the season where you can clearly pick out interceptions or missed throws, even from yesterday, where it just seems like Brady is throwing to a different route. That's because he is. That's what's happening because they don't have that chemistry. And that's what happens when you bring in a new quarterback and it's magnified, 1, in a Bruce Arians system, and 2, because it's Tom Brady and the Bucs, and everybody was talking about him coming into the season, and that hype has followed them all year long. The one thing that I do want to say, and I understand it's Bruce Arians' system, and I read today, I know Riv sent it to us, that Tom Brady is actually calling the plays before the game in the huddle, yada, yada.
He's picking what plays he wants to run during the game.
Yeah.
Which all that mean, every single quarterback does that.
Yeah.
So
I wish that they would utilize the run game and the short routes more, also differently, because I don't like the way they utilize the run game. They run on first down way too much, in my opinion. You look at a team like the Chiefs, they rarely ever, I think out of their breakdown yesterday, 26 of their first down plays were passes and 6 of them were runs. And that's what makes them so successful. At the start of downs, they're letting Patrick Mahomes make plays. And I think that the Buccaneers should take a page from that. But in the same sense, I think that they should use their run game and shorter routes differently. I think that Ronald Jones looked great yesterday, which was a great sign because he had a terrible year last year and he has a little bit of a slow start this year, but he looked good yesterday. And I think that's something they can build on. And on top of that, the play action game, I think they should utilize it more. And I think it would open things up deep because you look at yesterday as an example and multiple times throughout this season, it feels like the Buccaneers are forcing the ball down the field, which I understand is Bruce Arians' system. But the play action fake is taking over football. It's one of the biggest phenomenons in the league. The league average for the play action fake is 26% of plays. The Buccaneers run it only about 18% of their plays. Brady on non-play action passes has a 90 passer rating and averages 6 yards per attempt versus with the play action fake, 115 passer rating and 9 yards per attempt. So I think that they should incorporate that into their offense a little bit more. And I think that they looked really good, especially early on. They were utilizing the short passing game more than just going deep, and they put themselves in a hole where they had to take shots downfield. I just think that utilizing that earlier in the game would open things up downfield better later on and make it easier in a situation where they don't have that chemistry nailed down yet.
For sure. I think people are overreacting to the Bucs' slow start or how they play versus the better teams. I think people are overreacting to it. And everybody needs to give Tom Brady and the Bucs time to figure it out.
Yeah, and if this is a slow start, go look at the numbers. Tom Brady is a top 5, at least top 10 quarterback in almost any measurable that you could pick out for a quarterback. So if this is a slow start, then it's pretty darn good. And I don't want to see him at his peak because if this offense starts hitting on all cylinders and they're going into a bye week this week and it's the best chance they're going to have to get on the same page. If they start hitting on all cylinders, they will be the only team in football that can keep up with the Chiefs.
Before we move on to the next segment, just lift your foot up because you're stepping on the wire. Okay,
my bad. Good call.
Okay, so this next segment is we're going to talk about the teams that are 5-6 currently: the Minnesota Vikings, the Chicago Bears, the 49ers, and the Patriots. 3 of these teams won, which made them 5-6, and one of them lost, the Bears, which made them 5-6 as well. So out of these 4 teams, which team do you think has the best shot at making the playoffs?
Well, immediately off the bat, I'm going to eliminate the Bears because we'll talk about Matt Nagy in a second. I think he is a very bad head coach, and I think that that's going to plague the Bears for the rest of the season. I don't think they have any chance. Then the Vikings, for me, they've been too inconsistent, and also, I'll lump the 49ers in here. It's not as much as they've been inconsistent, but dealing with injuries, they've had a tough time finding their footing. And in the NFC, I think they're going to have a much harder time making the playoffs than an AFC team. Personally, I don't know that any of these teams have a chance at making it. But if I had to say one, I would say the New England Patriots, if for no other reason than they're an AFC team. And you look at it coming down the stretch, they don't have the toughest schedule in the world. They have the Chargers coming up. And the Chargers don't have a great defense. And as much as the Chargers have a great offense, I think that Cam Newton's going to be able to move the ball against that Chargers defense. I think everybody has shown that. It's going to come down to an offensive duel, and we'll see if Bill Belichick can out-scheme Anthony Lynn, and I will bet yes. Then you look at the Rams, another team that's been inconsistent, and we'll talk about them too. The Dolphins, the Bills, and the Jets. So it's not an easy schedule per se, but I think that with that schedule in the AFC, it gives them the best chance out of any of these 4 teams.
The team that has the best chance is the Vikings, and I'm going to simplify it. The 49ers aren't healthy. The Bears have Matt Nagy, and they have a horrible QB situation, and the Patriots have no offense. The Vikings have the best quarterback among those 4 teams. And I also think, like, outside of the Bears schedule, they have the easiest schedule. I mean, you mentioned the Patriots. I'll just go into them first. I think they lose to the Rams. They lose to the Dolphins. They're 5-6. If they lose 2 games, that's 8 losses. The best they can finish is 8-8. That won't make the playoffs in the AFC. You look at the 49ers. They have the Bills, Washington, Cowboys, Cardinals, Seahawks. I think they lose 3 of those games, 9 losses. They won't make the playoffs in the NFC like that. The Bears, they can beat the Lions. They can beat the Texans. Will Fuller's not playing no more. He's suspended. They can beat the Vikings too. They can beat the Jaguars. They'll lose to the Packers. So you win 4 games, you can finish 9-7. And the NFC, is that going to make the playoffs? I don't know, maybe. But then you look at the Vikings, the Jaguars, they can beat them. The Bucs, which Tampa Bay are we going to get?
Yeah.
You know, which Tampa, that's a game that can go either way. Look at the Bears, they can beat the Bears just as equally as the Bears can beat the Vikings. The Saints, that's a loss. The Lions, they can beat them. So the Bears and the Vikings both can win 4 games, in my opinion. They have 4 games that are winnable, and at 9-7 or 9-7, you can win. You can make the playoffs in the NFC. So I don't want to pick the Bears over the Vikings because I think the Vikings have a better quarterback. They have a better offense, and I would rather put my faith in a team that can score points than a team that can't score any.
I think it comes down to 2 games that will make the difference. I think the Patriots versus the Dolphins will be a huge game because if the Patriots can get a win against the Dolphins, obviously not only are they adding a win to their own resume, but they're taking a loss away or they're adding a loss to the Dolphins, taking a win away from the Dolphins, which is huge when it comes down to records at the end of the season because that's going to be probably the team that they will be fighting with for the 7th spot. And then you mentioned that Vikings-Bears game. Whoever wins that game has a chance in the NFC. I would say the Vikings have a better chance than the Bears just because I don't trust Matt Nagy at all after what we've seen from him this season. So if I had to pick one of those NFC teams, I would say the Vikings, but they've been so inconsistent that I shy away from picking them. And again, I don't think that any of these teams have a very good chance, but I would pick the Patriots if I had to pick one. You know, Bill Belichick, he's been there. He's a great head coach. And I trust him more getting this defense together, and I'll rely on that rather than betting on the Vikings.
Truthfully, like when you look at the games that the Vikings have played, I feel like they should have 2 more wins than they have right now. You look at the Cowboys game, I think the Vikings should have won that game.
100%.
Then you look at an earlier game, Seattle. If Dalvin Cook is playing and Alexander Mattison is not on that final play, I think the Vikings win that game as well. And you could say the same for the Patriots.
Yeah.
You know, I think all of these teams, I'll talk about the Patriots mostly. They've gotten this rep as this horrible team, but in reality, they're just an average team. They're nothing special, but they're not a bad team. By no stretch of the imagination are they a bad team. They're an okay team. But with that being said, I still have the Vikings, but I also believe, to agree with your point, I don't think any of these teams at the end of the day will make the playoffs. They lost too many games that they should have won. The Vikings losing to Dallas, which should have been a gimme win, losing to the Seahawks earlier in the year.
Losing to the Falcons, too.
And the Patriots losing to the Seahawks, too, when Cam Newton couldn't get the touchdown on that QB power.
Yeah.
So they didn't convert when they needed to, and those losses are coming to haunt them now as they're trying to make this playoff push.
Yeah, and I think that is a statement on how good the league has been this year because obviously you have teams like the Steelers, the Chiefs, the Saints at the top. I think that those 3 teams are in the best looking teams this season, and then you could go a step lower and have teams like the Packers, the Buccaneers. You could even make an argument the Titans or Colts are in there. The league has been extremely competitive. Outside of then, you look on the other side, maybe the Jets and Jaguars. Outside of those teams, the middle of the league has been essentially wide open. And I think it's been very good for football in general this year. I think it's been a great season to watch, especially despite all the conditions coming into the year. The football has been a great product on the field, top to bottom in the league.
After the Sunday night football game, the Bears versus Packers, in Matt Nagy's post-game press conference, he said this: have some personal pride, have a freaking sense of urgency. He was talking to the defense in that press conference. He basically called them out after an embarrassing loss on Sunday night. And I think this can't look any more stupider than it looks. You're calling out a defense that has been eighth in the NFL in points allowed, 13th in yards. And the problem with the problem with the team is you. The problem is the offense. It's your play calling. It's your abysmal play calling, which has got the defense not playing that hard because they did look disinterested yesterday, but it's because of you. It's because nobody respects you, nobody likes you as a coach, and everybody, the players and the fan base, want Matt Nagy to be fired. I mean, since 2018, when he got to the Bears, people like to use that 2018 season as a basis, but he was ninth in points. But just because he was ninth in points doesn't mean that their offense was good. They were 21st in yards. So they didn't move the ball that well. They just scored because their defense set them up in great field position, and they were in position to score those points. 2019, 29th in yards, 29th in points. 2020, 31st in yards, 29th in points. So when we talked about Matt Patricia earlier on in the episode, Matt Nagy is the opposite of that. Matt Nagy was supposed to come in as a great offensive guru QB coach, and his offense has been bad. Same as Patricia was supposed to go to the Lions as a great defensive coach, and their defense has been bad. And that goes back to the point that I was telling you about Andy Reid's coaching tree being overrated. Matt Nagy only worked 1 year as an offensive coordinator for Andy Reid. In that 1 year, they were 5th in yards, 6th in points on a really good Kansas City Chiefs team. But you look at the offensive coordinators for Andy Reid's coaching tree, Pat Shurmur didn't work out with the Giants. Doug Peterson, he did work out because they won a Super Bowl, but now in hindsight, we're looking more at Frank Reich than we're looking at Doug Peterson, and we see the problems that Peterson has had this year with the Eagles. Then you look at Matt Nagy, who's a disaster, and Brad Childress, who got fired from the Vikings in 2010. So Andy Reid's track record with offensive coordinators becoming good head coaches from his coaching tree is not impressive. The best coaches have been John Harbaugh, special teams coordinator, Ron Rivera, defensive coordinator, and Sean McDermott, defensive coordinator. And some honorable mentions are Leslie Frazier, Todd Bowles, who are both defensive coaches as well.
Yeah, and you mentioned that 2018 season. It was lightning in a bottle. And obviously, you mentioned some of the numbers there. They look better. They were 21st in yards still, but 9th in scoring. And I think that says a lot about the situation the defense put them in. The defense that year was first in scoring, points, and rushing yards allowed. So, the defense was setting them up very well that season. And I'll admit, I'll be the first person to admit, I fell for that 2018 Matt Nagy season. He looked like a genius, but it helped a lot that Mitchell Trubisky looked better that season than he has since then. The defense looked better that season than it has since then. And now you look at him last year, offensively, 29th in offensive yards and points, 27th and 28th in rushing yards and touchdowns, 25th in passing yards and touchdowns. Then so far this year, 31st in offensive passing yards and points per game, 32nd in rushing yards and touchdowns, 25th and 19th in passing yards and touchdowns. So clearly he's not the guy. I think it's becoming more and more obvious every year, and we can't keep clinging on to one season. And I mentioned Mitchell Trubisky has not played well since his rookie year. And his second year, my apologies. But I think some of that has to be attributed to Matt Nagy. He has not progressed at all. Like, he has not developed whatsoever. He's regressed since then. And at worst, even if a quarterback doesn't have talent like that, if he showed that 2018 season, he looked pretty solid, I think it's fair to say. And then he came out the next season. Where was that?
Well, even in 2018, Mitchell Trubisky couldn't see one side of the field. He only really passed to one side of the field, and there were stats that proved it. I don't have them on me, but I saw him that year. He wasn't good then. I think everybody knew Mitchell Trubisky wasn't that guy. But I also believe that Matt Nagy ruined him as well. I mean, not only did you shatter the kid's confidence, and I call him kid and I'm younger than him, but in hindsight, when the NFL, there's so many older players, you ruined Mitchell Trubisky's confidence by bringing in Nick Foles, and then last year bringing in Chase Daniel to replace him for a couple games. You really shattered Trubisky's confidence. And I think if you're a coach, you have to try to find the best way to get the most out of your players. I believe if this was Kyle Shanahan, Trubisky wouldn't look like this. If this was a better head offensive coach, Trubisky wouldn't look like this. I think Trubisky, he has talent and he's good. If they utilized him more in the run game to run, I think he's okay. He's not as bad as what he's been made out to be. But then again, he's always going to be tied to Deshaun and Patrick Mahomes. Yeah. and the Bears traded up for him as well. I think it's safe to say that after this year, after the season's over, Matt Nagy will get fired and Ryan Pace will get fired. I was
Yeah.
looking at Ryan Pace's track record in the draft. I didn't look at his free agent signings or his trades. I looked at the draft. Ryan Pace is not bad at drafting. He's an okay drafter. But unfortunately, that Mitchell Trubisky and trading up for Trubisky pick is going to haunt him for the rest of his general managing career, because you traded up for Trubisky and he didn't even have an interview with Deshaun Watson. He didn't even sit him down for an interview. You picked a guy who's probably going to go down as a bust over two, safe to say, like maybe future Hall of Fame quarterbacks.
Yeah, and even if you 1,000% believe that Mitchell Trubisky is your guy, to not even have an interview with Deshaun Watson was no under the radar guy. He was the best quarterback in college football the year before, won them the national championship. Like, that's inexcusable. And that's just not being prepared come draft time. Like, how do you afford yourself the opportunity to properly scout a player and you don't even have a sit-down meeting with him? So I think that they need to take a page out of the Lions playbook, out of the Texans playbook, hit the reset button. And the tough thing for them now is they've been set back a couple of years by whatever's happened to this offense. Mitchell Trubisky is essentially worthless at this point in his career. So where do they go from here?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think first things first, they got to fire Matt Nagy and bring in a new head coach. Who that's going to be, we don't know. Trubisky was a second pick in the draft. Now we're going to talk about the number one pick, I believe, in the 2016 or 2017 draft, Jared Goff.
I think it was 16.
Jared Goff, former number one pick. The Rams lost to the 49ers in which looked like they should have won that game, in all honesty. Do you believe that Jared Goff is holding back the Rams?
I have been low on Jared Goff ever since he got drafted. And a lot of people got on me because of it, but I've never been high on Jared Goff. And this is not meant to be hate on Jared Goff. I think that he is a perfectly average quarterback. I don't think he's anything more than that, though. And I think that that is holding back the Rams, because the Rams should be championship contenders. They should have been championship contenders last year. And even though they were in the championship the year before, they should have won the championship. Because when you have Sean McVay, who is, you know, a lot of people say the best, brightest, youngest mind in football, you have the defense that they have, which is a top 3 unit in the league. There is no way that they should be as struggling as much as they are this year. You look at them, the first 7 weeks of the season, they played Dallas, Philadelphia, Buffalo, which is a good game, the Giants, the Washington football team, the 49ers riddled with injuries, and the Bears, who we just talked about. In those games, Jared Goff threw 12 touchdowns, only 4 interceptions, and lost no fumbles. In the last 4 games against Miami, Seattle, Tampa Bay, San Francisco, 4 touchdowns, 6 interceptions, and 4 lost fumbles. And that's just a microcosm of his entire career. You know, he shows moments of greatness. You look back at that, I believe it was a Monday Night Football or a Thursday Night Football against the Chiefs.
Monday night.
That might have been the greatest football game I've ever seen. And he looked incredible. He outdueled Patrick Mahomes, who's the greatest quarterback in football. But then there's times like yesterday where you watch him, and on 7 throws down the field, he only completed 1 of them. And it's like you're not even watching the same guy. It makes no sense to me. And on top of that, under pressure, he's a completely different quarterback. So far this season, he has a 38.1 completion rate under pressure, and that's a drop of 29.3% from a clean pocket percentage. So clearly, he's not the same quarterback under pressure, and that's not just a one-year thing. He had a 42% completion rate under pressure in 2019 and 43% in 2020. So he's a totally different quarterback under pressure. And while the line has been solid, you know, I talked about it when Andrew Whitworth went down. That was a big concern for me. As much as I love the Rams defense and I like Sean McVay, I just don't trust Jared Goff. And I do think he's holding back this Rams team. I think that they should be, at this point, running away with the division. And at the beginning of the season, I wouldn't have said that even if they had a different quarterback, but the Seahawks have underperformed and the Cardinals have underperformed. There's no reason they should not be running away with this division right now.
Man, I don't think the Cardinals have underperformed. I think the Cardinals are still a team that, they've
Yeah.
gotten better from last year.
I shouldn't say underperformed.
Yeah,
They've performed to, I think, where you and I expected they might have
I
this
saw
year.
9-7. So is Jared Goff the problem with the Rams? The short answer is yes. I don't think it's because of Andrew Whitworth. I think it's just because Jared Goff is really inconsistent. We're going to talk about the game yesterday. In the first quarter, he throws an interception to Richard Sherman. In the second quarter, he fumbles before the half. They're in field goal range. They could get 3 points up on the board. Jared Goff fumbles. In the third quarter, in the first drive of the third quarter, Jared Goff gets intercepted by Javon Kinlaw, a rookie, and he takes it back for a touchdown. Granted, Jared Goff was hit on the play by Kevin Givens, but still, after that score, they're down 17-6. Because of Aaron Donald's heroicness, he forces a fumble. Troy Hill takes it back for a touchdown. It's now 17-13. Then Cam Akers basically brings a spark to the Rams, gets a huge run, then finishes it off with a score. Now the Rams are up 20-17. Then I'm just going to talk about the last drive in the fourth quarter. Jared Goff had Robert Woods on what was a out route or comeback route. He was super inaccurate on the pass. It would have been a first down, and because of that, the Rams are forced to now punt to the 49ers. And when the 49ers get the ball back, Nick Mullins throws a slant to Debo. Debo takes it for about like 20 yards, and Debo came up huge in that final drive, puts them in field goal range, and now the 49ers hit a walk-off field goal to win the game. Jared Goff was responsible for 0 scores in that game. Aaron Donald scored. Cam Akers scored. I believe I forgot who scored. It might have been like Malcolm Brown or something. But the Rams had 4 turnovers. 3 of those were by Goff. 1 of them was by Malcolm Brown. And even though the Rams turned it over, so did the 49ers. They had 3 turnovers. So for the 49ers to make that many mistakes, to be as injured as they were, and for Jared Goff to basically look worse than Nick Mullins, who was an undrafted quarterback, it just goes to show how inconsistent Jared Goff has been throughout his career. We don't talk about it enough, but he was the first overall pick. And we don't talk about how much he's kind of underachieved for a first overall pick because Carson Wentz was in that draft, and we see what he's been doing. He hasn't been impressive. And Dak Prescott, a guy that a lot of people label as overrated, who puts up garbage time stats. So that quarterback class, there hasn't been an elite player come from that class outside of Carson Wentz's 2016 or 2017 season, I believe. I think it was 2017. Yeah. So that's the only thing. There's no elite quarterback in that class, which is why we don't talk about Goff. But Goff is in the same mode as the Baker Mayfields, the Jimmy Garoppolos. He's probably like same with Kirk Cousins. They rely on play action passing. They rely on a better team around them. And that's basically what Jared Goff is. He's probably a little better than Baker Mayfield, but that's who he is. He has to rely on a great scheme, great players around him in order to be successful. And even then, he's very inconsistent.
Yeah, and you mentioned he's the first overall pick. He's the 6th highest paid quarterback in all of football. And for that expectations, he just doesn't perform to that level. You mentioned 3 guys. I also had Kirk Cousins written down as the guy that I think he compares to. I would lean towards Kirk Cousins, especially this season. Kirk Cousins has looked above average this season. I think that Jared Goff is a middle-of-the-road quarterback. He won't win you games. You'll either win with him or you'll win in spite of him.
I think he'll win you games. He, like I said, he has those moments, but he's just inconsistent. I've seen Jared Goff win games. So I'm not going to say he won't win you games, but he won't do it on a consistent basis.
And another thing is their offensive scheme, and we haven't seen McVay without Jared Goff, so I can't say if this is true or not, but I wonder if Sean McVay is not limiting that offense to cater to Jared Goff, because you see they run a lot through the running game, the play action, the pre-motion, the pre-snap motions. Is that because he doesn't trust Jared Goff like a team like the Chiefs trust Patrick Mahomes? And obviously that's a tough example, but a team like that, if they had a quarterback they could trust, I just feel like they would be better off. And I would love to see Sean McVay with a different quarterback to see if his play calling would change.
I mean, his play calling would change just because it's a different player, but I don't think he's necessarily limiting the ceiling of that offense. I think that Sean McVay, I mean, after his first couple years in the league, teams figured him out and he had to go back to the drawing board. He stole a lot of things from Greg Roman's Ravens run heavy offense, incorporated it this year. They looked awesome, but now we see that teams figured out the Ravens. So if they figured out the Ravens, oh, now they figured out the Rams too. And that's why you see the drop in their offensive performance. So I don't think it's just Jared Goff to blame for the Rams being inconsistent. I also think it's Sean McVay to an extent. You know, he hasn't called the best plays at times, but I do think I would put more of the blame towards Goff, but that doesn't mean I'm totally exonerating Sean McVay. I think that, you know, he hasn't really adjusted completely so that offense can be consistent as much as he'd like to.
Yeah, and
He'd like it to be.
I'll say it this way: if you told me I had to pick one between McVay and Goff, I would pick McVay.
Oh yeah, no, without doubt. But I'm saying that I also don't think that Sean McVay is
That's fair.
no. There's
fair.
no blame to be had. I don't think that's the case either. So yesterday, Sunday Night Football, Aaron Rodgers, he passed 50,000 passing yards, another milestone to his amazing career. And 50,000 passing yards for him. He's now 11th all time in most passing yards. Right now, like he has a 117.6 QB rating, which is behind only his 14-1 season where he had a 122.5. He has the highest QBR of his career with an 85.2, ahead of his 14-1 season as well, where it was 84.5. And currently he has the highest completion percentage of his entire career at 68.5. So, simple question. Do you think Aaron Rodgers has been underappreciated?
I think that he's kind of been lost in translation because I personally believe he is still hanging with guys like Russell Wilson and Patrick Mahomes as much as you possibly can, because I think that those two guys are the two best quarterbacks in the league. But I think that he belongs in that discussion more than he belongs in the Tom Brady, Drew Brees discussion, which is where I feel like he gets lumped way too often just because of age and the time they've been in the league, and they overlapped when Rodgers first came into the league. I think that Aaron Rodgers is still a top 3 quarterback in football, and I think he makes a strong MVP case this season. And without him, the Packers are not the team that they are this year. And I have them very high in my power rankings this week, and they would not be that team without Aaron Rodgers. The defense has been super inconsistent this season, and him and Devontae Adams and to a lesser extent Aaron Jones have essentially willed them to being one of the best teams in the NFC. And so I think that it depends on who you ask, but I would say that Aaron Rodgers at this point in his career has become underappreciated. And we said it with a caller last week. I think that Aaron Rodgers is top 5 quarterback ever.
Well, I think he has been underappreciated, mostly because people don't understand what Aaron Rodgers has had to work with throughout his career. I blame kind of the mainstream media because they always create these clickbaity titles, and Aaron Rodgers has talked about it on the Pat McAfee show when he goes there on Tuesdays. I mean, he's talked about how he doesn't like the media because it's very clickbaity. I mean, I remember last year or 2 years ago when Mike McCarthy got fired, they were kind of blaming Aaron Rodgers for him getting fired. A bunch of drama about if Matt LaFleur and Aaron Rodgers are going to work, if Aaron Rodgers is stubborn, he's not going to listen to Matt LaFleur. Just a bunch of clickbaity stuff that now we know was not true.
Clearly, we see how that worked out.
They click perfectly. So yeah, he's underappreciated, and people don't appreciate him enough because of what he's had to do throughout his career. I mean, this guy has only had a top 5 defense one time in his career. That one time they won a Super Bowl against the Steelers. You look at the history of his career. Basically, he first started in 2008, and that was basically he got drafted in 2005, I believe. So he started his first game, his first game 3 years into his career. He was a full-time starter 3 years into his career. Imagine that happening now. People wouldn't have the patience for that. But nonetheless, 2011, they had the 19th ranked defense. They lost in the division game to the Giants. In 2012, they had the 11th ranked defense. 2013, they had the 24th ranked defense. With the 24th ranked defense, they lost in a wild card. 2014, they had the 13th ranked defense. they lost in the NFC championship game to the Legion of Boom. 2015, 12th ranked defense. 2016, 21st ranked defense. With the 21st ranked defense, Aaron Rodgers took that team to the NFC championship. They lost to the Falcons. Kyle Shanahan was the offensive coordinator for that team. 2017, 26th ranked defense, missed the playoffs. 2018, I believe Rodgers was injured. 22nd ranked defense. 2019, which was last year, they had the 9th ranked defense. They made the NFC championship game and they lost, of course. And this year they have the 19th ranked defense. I mean, just to put that into context, Aaron Rodgers has only had a top 5 defense one time in his career. He won a Super Bowl. Tom Brady has had a top 5 defense 8 times in his career. So Aaron Rodgers has never been surrounded with a consistently great defensive unit. And not only is he not surrounded with a great defensive unit now, but he's not surrounded with a great offensive unit either. I mean, he's making guys look better than they are, I believe, in my opinion. But also, they don't have a number 2 receiver. That's we've been begging the Packers to get that. Even though I think Marquez Valdes-Scantling has been more consistent, and he has the talent and potential to be that, he's just too inconsistent.
Yeah.
He drops way too many passes.
He's getting there, but he's not that yet.
And Aaron Rodgers, he's had to deal with so much. He hasn't had a consistently great team. We've seen that the coaching with Mike McCarthy wasn't great. So I do think he's underappreciated because I think too much, and this goes to show with a lot of quarterbacks in the NFL, the Matthew Staffords, the Matt Ryans of the world, quarterbacks that don't win, that don't make it to the playoffs because their team stinks. They get underappreciated. And even though Aaron Rodgers has made the playoffs, the line for him, the ceiling for him is Super Bowl. Every year for Rodgers is Super Bowl or bust. If he doesn't win a Super Bowl, it's a bust season. And people talk about Rodgers like he hasn't won one, even though he has.
Yeah, and I know that this is a very, again, cliche argument and a hypothetical thing, but I want to preface this by saying Tom Brady is the greatest quarterback of all time to me. His resume is untouchable. You can't argue what he did in New England. But if you put Aaron Rodgers in New England, I think they win more than the 6 that they won. I think that Aaron Rodgers is, if not the most skilled quarterback of all time, at least one of the most skilled quarterbacks of all time. I think he's the most skilled out of Brady, Breeze, any of these quarterbacks that have been in the league the past couple of years. And now, Mahomes is obviously giving him a run for his money. But I think that Aaron Rodgers is the most skilled quarterback that I've seen in my lifetime. Throws he makes, his arm strength, his accuracy, the windows he throws in, his pocket presence on the move. And that's another thing he doesn't get credit for. Getting out of the pocket and making plays with his legs. He does that. He makes plays out of nothing. Like, he does things that I have never seen from other quarterbacks. I mean, before Patrick Mahomes, it was Aaron Rodgers. He was the guy that was the most talented quarterback that we have seen in like ever. Yeah.
Before Mahomes, it was Rodgers. Now, because Mahomes is here, we kind of, give a blind eye to Rodgers and don't notice him as much. But that's the reason why he's underappreciated. And whenever the media talks about him, it's always usually negative. And I feel like he deserves better than that because not only is he a great quarterback, but he's a good person as well.
And it happens a lot to guys who aren't open to the media. They just get painted as a villain because if you don't say anything at all, people most of the time assume the worst. And you mentioned a couple of cases, and I think it's become very clear Mike McCarthy was not fired because of Aaron Rodgers in Green Bay. It's because he didn't adjust to the times, and that's become very clear in Dallas. And with Matt LaFleur, I think they've worked out very well. And you mentioned that I think Aaron Rodgers, I don't know him personally. He seems like a great guy. He seems like a great leader. And I agree. I think he's underappreciated. He's a top 5 quarterback of all time for me, and he's a top 3 quarterback in the league right now for me.
So Green Bay won yesterday. I believe they're 8-3 now. And I think the Saints are ahead of them. They're at 8-2 or 9-2. What 9-2? So who do you think is the best team in the NFC currently?
I'm going to go with the Saints. The reason that I give pause when I say that is because without Drew Brees, they're a different team. They're still finding their footing. Are they going to go with Taysom Hill? Are they going to go with Jameis Winston? there's still a lot of question marks, and they haven't really been tested since Drew Brees went down. They beat the Falcons and then the Broncos yesterday, which wasn't even a football game. Respect to Kendall Hinton, but that can't be a judge at all. So they're going to get tested, and we're going to see what the Saints really are. But as of now, I would say the Saints are the best team in the NFC. I think they have the best defense in the NFC. And along with that, their offense is so high powered that even without Drew Brees, they've looked pretty solid. Again, they have the Chiefs coming up on their schedule, the Vikings who can give them a test. But the playoffs are going to be a different animal because then they also have the Eagles, the Falcons, the Panthers. So they're not going to be the most battle-tested team going into the playoffs. I like their personnel right now more than anybody else, and I think they've been more consistent than a lot of other teams in the NFC. I don't know if they would be my bet to make it out of the NFC, but I think that from what we've seen, they're my best team in the NFC.
The Saints are the best team in the NFC right now. It's debatable if they're the best defense. I'm not sure about that, but I think they're the best team in the NFC. Not with Taysom Hill, because I think there's a real ceiling on Taysom Hill on who he can be. And once he faces an elite defense, he's going to look really bad.
Or even another high-powered offense. Like when they face the Chiefs, I don't feel confident in Taysom Hill keeping it close with Patrick Mahomes, even as good as the defense is.
Yeah, but I think when they face a better team, Taysom Hill is not going to look how he looked against the Falcons his first game. Quan Alexander has made that defense faster. It was a good trade to make. But this isn't new with the Saints. They're usually always the best team in the regular season. They have been for the last couple of years. I know they haven't finished first, but whenever we think about the best team in the NFC, people usually pick the Saints. I mean, in 2017, a lot of people thought they were the best team in the NFC. They lost to the Vikings on a Minnesota Miracle. 2018, they lost to the Rams on what was an outrageous non-PI call, which created a new rule for pass interferences to get challenged. And then last year, they lost fairly to the Vikings. Kirk Cousins beat them fair and square. I get it. But for the past couple of years, they've been the best regular season team. And I think now it's just up to them to now do it in the playoffs. They haven't been a team to win in the playoffs. And I think Saints fans are dying for them to finally win. They're dying for bad luck not to strike again.
Yeah. And I read, this might be incorrect, Drew Brees is looking at a week 15 timeline to return, potentially. And if that's the case, and he has 2-3 weeks going into the playoffs, there's no excuses at this point. And Drew Brees, I love him. He's a great leader, seems like a really good guy, and he's an all-time great quarterback. There's no debate about it. But come playoff time, his numbers always seem to drop, and that's what kills them. Even though they lose games on some of the most fluke things like the Minnesota Miracle, the phantom pass interference, they shouldn't be in those situations. But that offense that looks so good all season, somehow come the playoffs, even the playing in their home dome, it always seems to take a hit. And this is maybe one last chance, because we don't know if Drew Brees is coming back after this, but this is one last chance possibly for Drew Brees to show that he's that guy in the playoffs too.
I mean, I think Drew Brees hasn't been the best in the playoffs, but I do think that that's mostly because the Saints have never had a true number 2 receiver. Like, it's always been Thomas. The last 2 years, it's been Michael Thomas, and they haven't had a true number 2. Now I think that they have Emmanuel Sanders. That's going to take pressure off of Michael Thomas. Jared Cook is there. So they have way more weapons to work with.
Yeah.
I think their problem is that what is your defense going to be? Because their defense was not that great to begin the season. Are they going to go back to that, or are they going to take it up to a new level? It's always a question mark with the Saints, because in the regular season, they're a great team. In the playoffs, they dip down. But I'll give the benefit of the doubt. I don't necessarily think that they dip down too much, because in the playoffs, you're facing great teams.
Yeah.
So to kind of blame the Saints for being in a close game against a great team, like, I don't totally agree with that, but I do understand it. I think that in the playoffs, there's a lot of close games. So, versus the Vikings, they should have won that game.
Yeah.
Versus the Rams, they should have won that game. They should have been to the Super Bowl. It should have been a Brees versus Brady Super Bowl, if we're being honest. And it just always seems like bad luck seems to go their way. They never have the benefit of the doubt.
Yeah, and I'm not necessarily personally blaming Breeze for those games. I'm just saying that is the general consensus, I feel like, from conversations I've had about Drew Brees and his playoff struggles, for lack of a better word. Another thing that's concerning about the Saints is when you look at their schedule after they started out 1-2, they beat the Lions, they beat the Chargers, they beat the Panthers, the Bears, then the Buccaneers, which is a good win. But again, we've talked about how Jekyll and Hyde the Buccaneers have been, then the decimated 49ers, the Falcons, and the Broncos. So there aren't many good teams in there. Not even great teams, good teams. So they're not going to be battle tested going into the playoffs like a lot of these other teams are. And that's got to be a concern, because come playoff time, there's going to be no Falcons. There's going to be no Broncos, Eagles, well, maybe the Eagles, but you get what I'm trying to say.
Mm-hmm. So now we talked about Breeze. We talked about Rodgers, two of the best quarterbacks. Now we're going to talk about Pick'em, our second to last segment of the show. NFL Pick'em Week 13, or Week 13 predictions. First game, Saints versus Falcons. I have the Saints in this one, and I think it's obvious. I just don't think the Falcons are a very good team.
Yeah, I'm also going Saints. They've looked better since they fired their coach, but I don't think they can hang with the Saints at all.
Next game is Jaguars versus Vikings. This is another easy pick. I got the Vikings in this one.
Vikings.
Next game, Browns versus Titans. And before I give my pick, the Browns are probably one of the worst 8-3 teams that I can remember. I mean, the teams that they've beaten are not that good outside of the Colts. They got blown out by the Steelers and Ravens. I don't even have them as a top 10 team, and they're 8-3.
They fought for their lives last week against the Jaguars too.
They're 18th ranked in offense, 21st in defense. I got the Titans in this game. I think they're going to win this game.
Yeah, I'm also going with the Titans. I just don't trust Baker Mayfield. The sad is I like Baker Mayfield. I loved him coming out of college, but he's just been so inconsistent. I can't trust him, and I don't think that Derrick Henry is going to be stopped. So
next game, Lions versus Bears. I got the Lions in this game. I think that after they fired Matt Patricia and Bob Quinn, they're going to come out with some new energy. And I think the Bears have no energy, and they're waiting for their coach, Matt Nagy, to get fired. So the Lions are going to come into this game, and they're going to handle their business. They're going to beat the Bears.
I wish that I could show you my notes, because I also went with the Lions. I said, just fired Matt Patricia. They're going to get a boost from that. I think that you've seen the Texans have looked really good after firing Bill O'Brien. The Falcons have looked really good, and the Bears are still dealing with the enigma, Matt Nagy. So
next game, Bengals versus Dolphins. Joe Burrow is out for the year, so I'll probably pick. I won't pick the Bengals again this year. Yeah. I'm picking the Dolphins in this one, whether Fitzpatrick or Tua starts. It doesn't matter.
I'm also going Dolphins.
So next game, Washington versus the Steelers. I have the Steelers in this one pretty easily. I don't have to think too much about this.
I'm going with the Steelers, but I think it'll be closer than a lot of people think. That Washington football team defense is a pretty underrated unit. So I think they'll keep it fairly close, but I think the Steelers are going to end up pulling it out.
Next game, Colts versus Texans. If the Texans had a Will Fuller, I might have considered them a little bit. But after losing a deep threat like that, a guy who really he really needs so much attention paid to him, I got the Colts. They have one of the best defenses in the league, and Texans have one of the worst defenses in the league. So the Colts can move the ball against them.
Yeah, agreed for pretty much all the same reasons. I'm going with the Colts.
Next game, Raiders versus Jets. And it hurts me to say this, but the Jets are going to win this game.
No, they're not.
And the Jets are going to ruin their chances of getting the number one pick, because they're going to beat the Raiders. Last year, nobody picked the Jets to beat the Raiders, and the Jets blew them out. This year, the same is going to happen. The Raiders, once again, are going to fumble a shot at the playoffs because they crumbled down the stretch, and the Jets are going to fumble their chance to draft Trevor Lawrence. The Jets are going to win this game.
There's no chance the Raiders are going to win handily.
You think the Raiders are going to win by a lot?
Yes.
Okay. Next game, Giants versus Seahawks. This might be a closer game than it seems, because the Giants have a really good defense, but I got the Seahawks. I can't pick against the Seahawks. It's Russell Wilson versus Colt McCoy. If Daniel Jones was there, I would have given it more consideration, but I don't trust Colt McCoy at all, and he can't run either. So I got the Seahawks.
Yeah. And I was going to say the same thing. If Daniel Jones was healthy, I might have picked the Giants in this game because I like that Giants defensive unit. They've been playing really well. I think that Joe Judge is doing a nice job there, but without Daniel Jones going with Colt McCoy, I don't think they have any chance of going Seahawks.
Next game, Rams versus Cardinals. This is going to be a tough game, probably a game that's going to decide who's first place in the NFC West. And I got the Rams. I think teams have been playing Kyler Murray better these past few weeks. After Jared Goff stinked it up against the 49ers, I don't think he does it against the Cardinals. I think the Rams are going to win the NFC West, and this is just another step to get there.
This was the toughest game for me to pick. I left it for the last out of any of the games that I picked, and my head is telling me to go with the Rams because that defense is so good between Aaron Donald and their corner duo that they've been the best against number 1 and number 2 wide receivers this season. I just, in my heart, it tells me to pick the Cardinals coming off a tough loss against the Patriots. I feel like they feel the Rams nipping at their heels. Well, not tied with them now at the top of the division. I think the Cardinals know they need this one, and I think they're going to pull it out.
Next game, Patriots versus Chargers. Believe it or not, I got the Chargers in this one. Like I really think that they're going to beat the Patriots. Like people want to talk about the Patriots defense or whatever. Their defense has not been the same, and they cannot move the ball. I mean, Cam Newton had 79 yards passing, I believe, against the Cardinals. I really don't think they're going to win this game. I think the Chargers are going to win.
I also went Chargers. I just don't think that Patriots offense can win in a shootout with the Chargers, and we've seen a shootout from the Chargers every week. So I think it comes down to a shootout, and Justin Herbert prevails.
Eagles versus Packers. Last year, the Eagles beat the Packers because they were running the ball on them all game. But I think the Packers get the better of them this upcoming week. I have a disclaimer, though. If Jalen Hurts starts, I have the Eagles.
Wow.
But if Carson Wentz is starting, I got the Packers.
Do you want to expand on that a little bit?
I just think Jalen Hurts gives them a newfound energy, and Carson Wentz, along with Doug Peterson, has been the problem for the Eagles.
Well,
the Chiefs, this is an easy one. I got the Chiefs on this one.
Yeah, I'm also going with the Chiefs.
Cowboys versus Ravens, another easy one. I got the Ravens in this one.
I'm also going with the Ravens. I don't care how many Ravens are on the COVID list. I'm going Ravens.
Then the last game, Bills versus 49ers. This is a tougher game to pick, but I'm going with the Buffalo Bills. And I think they know if they win this game, they probably got that AFC East on lock.
Yeah, I also think the 49ers can sneak up on teams at this point in the season just because they've dealt with so many injuries, and now they're starting to get at least semi-healthy, a little bit more healthy maybe, and they showed it against the Rams. They're no slouch of a team. Kyle Shanahan is a great coach, but with all that being said, I'm still going with the Bills.
Now the last segment of the episode, it's NFL Power Rankings Week 13, our top 10 teams of Week 13. And number 10, I got the Cardinals. I mean, after losing to the Patriots, I had to drop them down.
Oh, you were starting at 10.
Yeah, the Cardinals.
I was so confused.
I had to drop them down after losing to the Patriots. I mean, they beat the Patriots in nearly every category and still lost. They're the 10th best team in the NFL right now.
It pains me to put this team in because, like you said, I am not high on them at all, but just because of the success they had, I had to put them at 10, the Cleveland Browns. I don't think that they belong in the top 10 in the NFL. I think that there are some teams that were left out that deserve this spot more, but based on what they've shown, I went with the Browns.
The 9th best team is the Los Angeles Rams. Like I said, they lost to the 49ers, and after you lose a game like that you're supposed to win, you got to drop down in the power rankings. The Rams got to find a way to figure out. They got to finish off the season strong, and I got them at 9. I think their offense is really holding them back right now.
I went with the Seahawks at 9, and the reason I went with the Seahawks at 9 is because I trust them very much to beat the Eagles tonight. If they don't, my list would be different, but I am operating under the assumption that they win tonight, and I'm putting them at 9.
The 8th ranked team to me is the Miami Dolphins. I think you got to put them ahead of the Cardinals and the Rams, especially since they beat both those teams. I think they're a step below my seventh ranked team. The Dolphins still got a top 10 offense, I believe, in the top 10 defense. They have actually the second best ranked defense in terms of points allowed. So I think the Dolphins are for real, and they're a surprise team this year.
I went with the Colts at number 8. It was a tough loss, but again, without DeForest Buckner, that defense is totally different. And especially against Derrick Henry, you can't say how much that loss really hurt them. So I did not dock them as much as I normally would for that loss. I kept them at 8.
My number seventh ranked team is the Seattle Seahawks. I think they're finally starting to figure out that defense. They're starting to communicate better. Jamal Adams has been criminally underrated this season. I think the Seahawks are the seventh best team in the league, and I think that's their floor. In the coming weeks, I think they're gonna move even higher.
At number 7, I went with the Titans. As much as I didn't dock the Colts for that loss, I gave the Titans credit for beating a team that they should have beat. And even without DeForest Buckner, it's still a very good Colts team. There was no slouch of a game. So I give them credit for going out and getting that win. And I think that they're starting to figure things out a little bit more as of late, where they had that little lull in the middle of the season. I think they're starting to turn it up a little bit, especially Derrick Henry.
And my sixth ranked team is the Buffalo Bills. I mean, they beat the Seahawks, so I got to put them above them. I think the Buffalo Bills are a team to watch for, even though they still don't have a running game. Sometimes Devin Singletary comes in and does his thing, so does Zach Moss, but it's not consistent enough for me. That is a major hole, but their defense has been playing better. They're figuring it out. They're looking more like that Buffalo Bills defense of last year than they are at the beginning of this year. So I got them at 6.
Yeah, I put the Bucs at 6. I agonized over this because I don't think that they're the 6. I don't think they're at 6th talent wise in the league, but based on what we've seen with their inconsistencies, I docked them maybe a little bit more than I would have liked to, but I have them at 6. And I think that they will end up higher than that come playoff time, but for now.
Okay, so for my 5th ranked team, I have the Tampa Bay Bucs. I think the Bucs, even though they haven't been playing well against the better teams, they dominated the Packers, and communication is still a major problem. Once they figure that out, they're going to look like probably the best team in the NFL outside of the Chiefs, and people just have to be patient with the Bucs. In the regular season, they might not be outstanding, but be patient. They're going to show what they can do.
Yeah, at number 5, we had a flip-flop. I went with the Bills at 5. I think for a lot of reasons you said, Josh Allen is showing that he's pretty legit, and we doubted him to begin the season, but he has really turned it up this season. The defense has been good, and I just think all around they've looked like a really solid team top to bottom. So I went Bills at 5.
Okay, my 4th ranked team is the Tennessee Titans. I think that win against the Colts was a great win. So I got them at 4. Their running game is starting to look like the running game in the playoffs last year. Derrick Henry's getting back to form. Ryan Tannehill's playing amazing. Their defense is getting better. I got them at 4.
I went, and again, this is a team that I don't necessarily feel great about at the spot that I put them, but I worked from the bottom up, and the Packers ended up at 4 in my power rankings. I think a lot of it has to do with Aaron Rodgers and the way that offense has looked. I still don't trust the defense necessarily, but coming off a couple solid weeks, and a good win last night, obviously beating up on a team they deserve to beat up on, but they look good. I put the Packers at 4.
My 3rd best team is the Pittsburgh Steelers. Even though they've been dominant this season, they haven't done it against great competition. And even when they face the Ravens, they're not going to be fully there. So I got the Steelers at 3. I think their offense still limits them a lot, but we'll see what happens these coming weeks.
Yeah, I put the Saints at 3. I think that, like I said, they're the best team in the NFC. That defense, as much as they can be slightly inconsistent, they're a great unit. And the offense without Drew Brees is different, but they've still been okay without him for the past 2 weeks. Granted, not great competition. They need Drew Brees to come back if they want to be, or Jameis Winston to come in and fill the shoes of Drew Brees if they want to be the team they can be. So I have them at 3.
The number 2 ranked team is the New Orleans Saints. I think based off where they are right now, they're a step above the Steelers, especially after dominating the Bucs like that. I don't think the Steelers would have done that to the Bucs. The Saints have had some really impressive performances, so I'm going with them at 2. And like that's with Taysom Hill. You know, if Taysom Hill is not there, if it's Drew Brees, I don't think I put them over the Chiefs, but they're still at 2. They are a lock to probably finish as the second best team in the league.
I went with obviously the Steelers at 2 at 10-0. They've been deadlocked in this spot, and if it wasn't for the Chiefs, spoilers, if it wasn't for the Chiefs being the greatest offense that I've probably ever seen, they would be at number 1. But, you know, like you mentioned, the competition hasn't been great, and I've just been more impressed by the Chiefs than I have the Steelers, so I have them at 2.
Yeah. Then number 1, no surprise to anybody, the Kansas City Chiefs are the best team in the NFL currently. I mean, they're great defensively. They're great offensively. And the question now is just what team can stop them. I don't think any team can stop them. It's looking like they're going to 2-peat.
Yeah, it goes without saying. I also went with the Chiefs at 1. I think that they are the clear, far and away favorites to win. And as much as I said the competition in the league has been good this year, I just think the Chiefs are so much better than anyone else. And people have called me crazy for it, but I don't see anybody in the league that can stop that offense while also scoring on that defense that's been pretty underrated. It's a really good unit, probably a top 10 unit in the league. So I don't see anybody getting through them.
So this does it for our week 13 power rankings, top 10 teams in the NFL. Tell us who your top 10 list is in the comments below. And now this does it for the end of the show. If you guys stayed this long, we thank you. Like always, don't forget to follow us on Instagram and TikTok at Pick Aside Podcast, on Twitter at Pick Aside Pod. And don't forget to subscribe to us on Spotify and Apple Podcasts. I mean, we're on every podcasting platform, and we're also on YouTube, our main platform. So don't forget to subscribe to us either. And I just want to thank all of you. We hit 1,000 subscribers on YouTube. So thank you to everybody for helping us reach that. And thank you guys for listening, and see you next time. So that does it for the podcast version. Now we're going to take in callers. So whoever wants to call, I'll put the number on the screen in a bit.
Yeah, Juice Alert, who we've talked to a couple times before. Thank you very much for the donation. I believe that it's the first time we've ever gotten a donation live, right? So thank you very much for the donation. We really appreciate it. Do we think that Dwayne Haskins can succeed if given a second chance in DC, or if he gets traded to Indy, Pittsburgh, or Carolina? I think he can become great. I really like Dwayne Haskins coming out of college. I like Ohio State teams. They haven't necessarily developed the best quarterback talents in the past few years, but I was high on Dwayne Haskins coming out of school. It wasn't the best situation to go to in Washington. I like Ron Rivera. I think he's a great head coach. I think that he can be a good quarterback. I don't like the situation for him. I think it would be better for him if he got traded. So a couple of the destinations you mentioned, Indy and Pittsburgh, are the two. I've talked about them as potential targets for Sam Darnold as well. But I think that if Haskins goes there, he could step in and be solid. But he's got a lot of work to be done on him, just because I feel like he's been set back in Washington. We're getting set now for the callers. So if you guys want to call in, please. We want to hear your guys' thoughts and opinions. Joel is about to put up the phone number right now. Wow, they're already at halftime in this game. What's the score?
So if you guys want to call into the show, you guys can call into the show. We got 16 people watching now. So let's see what's up, man. See what you guys got to say. I'm excited.
I'm surprised that game is so close at half. It's 14-.
I know you're listening to me right now, moderator. You got to be quicker than that, man. That guy was spamming in the comments.
Yeah, I saw that.
It's ridiculous.
Run left. We're taking callers right now. So you make the discussion. What do you want to talk about? Call up. Numbers on the screen.
The full episode is going to be out along with, the segments are going to be on tomorrow. So you guys can, if you want to watch the segments and don't want to watch the full episode, they'll be on tomorrow. Or if you want to play this back, you can do that too. So guys, the phone number is on the screen right now. So call in.
Do you think the Seahawks hang on in this one and close out the Eagles?
What score?
14-6 at half.
I think they'll probably. Oh. Hello, you're on Pick a Side. What's up, Leo?
Yeah, what's up, y'all, man?
What's up, man?
Great to see you. Also, again, congratulations for your 1,000 subscribers.
Mm-hmm. Thank you, bro. We appreciate you.
Thank you very much.
My question was, well, I know y'all both Jets fans. I'm a Texas fan, but which coaching option is a better?
I think it's the Texans. I mean, you guys have Deshaun Watson, and I think he's probably a top 5 quarterback in the NFL. I think Deshaun Watson is very, very good. He's elite. And, even though the Texans have some money problems and they don't have all the draft picks, you guys have some good receivers. If you figure out that defense, they can be one of the better teams in the NFL, especially because Deshaun Watson is so good. And I think a coach would rather go to a situation like that because the Texans haven't been as dysfunctional as the Jets. The Jets have been dysfunctional for a long, long time. I don't think that's the case with the Texans. I think the Texans are the better option for a coach to go to.
I'll say, and again, I said this before during the segment. I believe it was on the best coaching position available. It might sound biased because I'm a Jet fan. I would say the Jets, not because of the team, the roster, the talent. Obviously, I think the Texans are in a better position talent-wise, especially with Deshaun Watson. Deshaun Watson is a top 5 quarterback in the league, and I don't think there's any debate about that. I just think that with the cap space, the Jets in this offseason are going to have $80 million in cap space, and they have the number 1 draft capital, whereas the Texans gave up a couple of their picks for this upcoming offseason, and they're not in a great space cap-wise. And then for the Jets, they also have the allure of drafting Trevor Lawrence, as long as they get the number 1 pick. If they don't get the number 1 pick, it's a different story. But I would lean towards the Jets, and that's trusting Joe Douglas, which I know Joel does not. So I would lean towards the Jets, but I don't think the Texans are a bad destination by any stretch. Any head coach stepping in and taking over a team with Deshaun Watson, you're already a step ahead of the game because you figured out your quarterback.
I understood your point, but even that, I would say one side for the Jets, one side for the Texans. The Jets, you have advantage for the offseason. You have a lot of cap salaries and draft picks. But even for the draft, there's not much guaranteed. That's a chance you might draft a bust or a chance to draft a star.
Yep.
The salary cap for the free agency, you never know who come into the Jets. For the Texans side, yes, even though a lot of people keep saying about the draft pick and the cap salary, but that's only for one off season.
Yeah, even exactly.
Other than.
Yeah, because it's just they just don't have a first round and second round pick this year, but next year they have all their picks. So I think that point kind of gets people use it too much, and I don't think it's really that good of a point, to be honest.
Yeah, and I will say 100% with my take, I'm trusting Joe Douglas to be at least a competent GM in New York for the Jets. If he's not, it's a totally different discussion. Then it's 100% the Texans. But I'm trusting Joe Douglas to at least be okay with those draft picks and salary cap this offseason. But I don't think that the Texans, again, are a bad destination whatsoever. Deshaun Watson, in my opinion, is very underrated because I don't think a lot of people or enough people have him in that top 5 discussion just because the Texans haven't necessarily been in that conversation with teams like the Chiefs and the Ravens the past few years. But I think that Deshaun Watson is easily a top 5 quarterback in the league, and walking into that situation, you can't go wrong.
Yeah, I have more advantage for for the offseason because at least y'all had a GM and we don't. Even if we don't have a GM, we're still concerned our offseason because, it's about the draft pick and the free agency. But I think people a little underrated that, yes, you just heard the news that Will Fuller got suspended, but he's free agent. You never know he was coming back.
Yeah, that's true. That's a great point.
Yeah, and I will say this, you guys are better off with no GM than you were with Bill O'Brien because at least now you're not moving backwards. So anybody will be an improvement over what Bill O'Brien was doing in that position.
Okay, good one. And one more question. Which coach will get fired and then we'll get a new coach? Other than the one we usually heard a lot.
Which coach is probably going to get fired and going to be a coach? I don't think it's going to. I think the one that has the best shot is probably Matt Nagy. But even him, I'll say probably Mike Zimmer. If he gets fired from Minnesota, I'll say Mike Zimmer.
Yeah, out of the obvious teams that are going to fire their coaches, I would say Anthony Lynn has a decent shot of being rehired just because he's well liked around the league. And I don't think he is a terrible coach. I think he would make a decent coordinator. But like I look at a guy like Adam Gase, that man should not get another job in football with what he's done to the Jets. So I would say either Anthony Lynn or Matt Nagy are two guys that I would say have a decent chance of getting rehired.
I have one coach that nobody mentioned much is the coach for the Jaguars.
Doug
Kadarius by the GM.
Doug Moran. Yeah, he's not bad.
Yeah, and it's tough
actually,
to,
no, he is bad.
It's tough to blame him for what's gone down in Jacksonville because they haven't had a lot of talent there, and the GM has not done a good job filling that roster. So I would be interested to see him on a different team that had a roster full of talent.
All right.
So we want to thank you for calling, man. Yeah.
All right.
Somebody's waiting on the phone right now, but we want to thank you for calling. We appreciate your support as always, and you're always welcome to call again, bro. We appreciate your support.
Yeah, thank you very much.
All right, you're welcome. Bye.
Bye. Have a good night.
Leo's one of the OGs. He was in here for our first stream on draft night, and he's been watching ever since. So we really
Run
appreciate
Left wants to get his question in. You can call the number on the phone right now. Seeing Hall is playing right now.
Yeah, I forgot that game was on tonight. Are they winning?
You see, I got
I'll look it up.
I think they're losing by 2.
To accept, press 1.
Hello?
Hello?
What's up, man? You're on Pick a Side.
Hello?
Can you hear me?
Oh, I'm watching it. Yeah, I hear you. I was watching it on the screen and it was the delay. So
Yeah.
But I have a question, man.
Okay, what's your question?
So the question is, Derrick Henry. I understand, this is a quarterback-driven league, and of course, Pat Mahomes is obviously the runner for MVP at the moment because Kyler Murray fell out the race, Russell Wilson fell out the race. My question is Derrick Henry MVP caliber, and is he second in the running right behind Pat Mahomes for you?
I think Derrick Henry deserves respect in terms of, him being noticed as one of the top players in the league, but I don't think that he's having a season that would grant him to win the MVP, especially over a quarterback. I mean, I think Pat Mahomes is, of course, ahead of him. I think Rodgers is ahead of him. Russell Wilson is ahead of him as well. Yeah, I think Rodgers has 33 touchdowns and 4 interceptions. I don't know. Derrick Henry's a great running back, but I don't even know if he's having a great running back season this year. I think it might be Dalvin Cook.
Wow. That's crazy.
I'll say for any position that's not a quarterback, it will always be an uphill battle. And obviously with Patrick Mahomes, I don't think anybody's winning it outside of him this season. But when you look at value, I think that Derrick Henry I think he's in the conversation, and I don't think that the MVP is always given to the most valuable player. I think that the lines get kind of blurred sometimes. When you look at Derrick Henry, what he does to that Titans offense, he might be more valuable to that offense.
Yes, he is our team. And like I just look at the Kansas City Chiefs. I mean, before Pat Mahomes took over, they played my Titans in the AFC Championship when we had Marcus Mariota, and he won that game. And they were really good that year. I mean, we were talking about Alex Smith and Pro Bowl considerations. He was looking really good, but obviously Pat Mahomes is better. But I just see the Chiefs. I mean, they have the 1 and 2 top receivers in the league are both Tyreek Hill and Travis Kelce. And I just feel like if you just switch quarterbacks, you took Ryan Tannehill, you put him on that team is still good. And I just can't see the same situation where one player, okay, besides Aaron Rodgers or Russell Wilson, but outside of those two guys, there is not one player who just takes a pounding and puts the team on their back the way Derrick Henry does. And I don't know, I just kind of want to see Derrick Henry just get, just come second behind Pat Mahomes. I understand Pat Mahomes is going to win, but, I just want to see a little bit more respect putting on Derrick Henry's name, from week to week.
What if Dalvin Cook was on the Titans?
Okay, I get the argument because I hear Dalvin Cook's name brought up a lot, but at the same time though, okay, Dalvin Cook is very good, but I don't know. I just see Derrick Henry this year alone, the 90+ yard run, the 2 game winner touchdowns in OT. I mean, yeah, Dalvin Cook, he put up monster numbers and he is number 2 in rushing yards this year. But at the same time, I just think Derrick Henry is just he's almost a little bit better. You know what I'm saying? It's in my opinion. So yeah, I think most people would side with taking Derrick Henry over Dalvin Cook too, but they're both good. I'm not saying like Dalvin Cook isn't good, but I just think Derrick Henry, when you look at the team success, I just think he maybe should get a few more nods.
Yeah, I think you make a very fair point. And again, I don't think that he's going to finish in that MVP, like maybe not even finish in the top 5. But I do think that even, regardless of whatever votes he gets for MVP, he is arguably a top 5 most valuable player to his team's success in the league, just because when he's running well, they're a totally different team than when he isn't. He pretty much single-handedly beat the Colts this weekend, and he makes that offense completely different. So,
and we have an opportunity to. I'm gonna finish it up, but we have opportunities to finish the rest of this season with all W's. Our toughest game going is the Green Bay Packers. We have the Browns this coming up Sunday, but after that we have the Packers, and the rest of them should be very winnable games. I mean, if we was to finish on a clean slate and we end up going 13-3, I mean, not 13-3, 12-4 or something, I just feel like come on, man. Like, come on. But I appreciate it, though.
Man, we appreciate the call. What's your name?
My name is Jared Goff, but I actually have a YouTube channel where I cover the Tennessee Titans in detail called Run Left. I actually commented on you guys one time when you were talking about the Titans. But, yeah.
Okay, that's awesome, man. We wish nothing but success for you and your channel, and thank you for supporting ours.
Yeah, thank you so much for supporting. And thanks for the call. Bro. I was gonna say, I could tell that you know your stuff.
Yeah. I'm a bit of a nerd.
Thank you very much for the call. Good luck the rest of the way. And if they finish the season like you just said, and Derrick Henry keeps putting up these numbers, don't be surprised to see him sneak into that MVP race.
Most definitely, bro. I appreciate it, man.
All right, have a good night. So we're gonna take in about like 2 or 3 more callers.
The line's on fire.
Jamal McKinney.
To accept, press 1. To send a voice.
Hey, what's up, Jamal?
Hey, what's up, guys? It's actually pronounced Jamal, but everybody.
Oh, Jamal.
So it's okay.
Oh well,
Yeah.
First things first. First things first. Thank you so much for donating to us. It means a lot. We appreciate it. We really do.
Hey, yeah, no problem, no problem. I kind of wanted to get your thoughts on Haskins and whatnot in that super chat, but I kind of wanted to talk about something else on the phone.
Okay.
So you guys both are Jets fans, right?
Yeah.
Unfortunately.
Unfortunately, okay. You can always become a Packers fan like me, man. Hey, man. But I just wanted to get you guys' thoughts on Sam Darnold. I wasn't really a huge fan of Sam Darnold when he was coming out of USC. I didn't think he was a bad prospect. I just thought that he was like overrated. Some people were calling him like this next great quarterback. I didn't have him rated as the best quarterback in that class. I had Baker Mayfield rated as the best. Now, obviously, Josh Allen and Lamar Jackson, those are the two best from the class, arguably. But what are you guys' thoughts on Sam Darnold? Obviously he hasn't been put in the best situation in New York, but do you guys think he can become a good quarterback one day? I personally think he can become a good quarterback, but not a great quarterback. I don't think his ceiling is as high as some people think. But what do you guys think about Sam Darnold? Because you guys watch more Jets games on a consistent basis than I do.
What I think about Sam Darnold is I think he has been overrated. I think that whenever a quarterback struggles and is in a bad situation, everybody likes to point to it, the receivers, the offensive line, all of that, but they tend to ignore everything else. Sam Darnold, there's no doubt about it that he doesn't have a good offensive line. He doesn't have good receivers, but it doesn't make up for he's just a terrible decision maker. There's a highlight play that he makes every other game, and fans get excited about that. But what they don't show you is the interceptions that he throws in that same game and those decisions that leave you just hitting your head because they're just really dumb decisions. I think Sam Darnold's ceiling is probably not even though they kind of look alike. I'm not trying to say this because they kind of look alike, but I think his ceiling is like an Andy Dalton. He can be good. He can be okay, but I don't think he'll be great. I don't think he'll be elite. And I'm actually getting tired of everybody thinking that Sam Darnold is a second coming of Ryan Tannehill and how he's going to just revive his career after he leaves Gase. Tannehill wasn't bad with Gase. Darnold is bad with Gase. You look at Tannehill's numbers in Miami, he was actually good with Adam Gase.
I think that, and my stance is changing week by week almost, because in the middle of the season, we had this discussion, and I said that I thought that Sam Darnold can go and become a star somewhere else. And I'll say if he was drafted to a better situation, I think that he had star potential coming out of college. And I didn't necessarily believe that at the time, but with the flashes I've seen from him in the league, I think that he had that potential. But now you're going on 3 years where not only did he not really develop, he's almost regressed and he's still making terrible decisions. And I just wonder if he's been damaged beyond repair. Like Joel said, I think he can go out and be a good, serviceable quarterback somewhere else, but I think it might be past the time that he can reach that peak of potential that I think he had at one point. And obviously, I think both sides, the Jets and Sam Darnold, both deserve blame for how he's played. But at this point, I think he can be, if he gets traded to a team like the Colts or the Steelers and he walks into that situation with a great offense around him, or at least a solid offensive situation around him, I think that he can be a pretty good quarterback in the league.
Yeah, I kind of am with Joel, honestly. I don't think that Sam Darnold's ceiling is a prime Andy Dalton. I think his ceiling is a little bit higher. I wasn't a big Andy Dalton fan when he was in Cincinnati. I live in Ohio, so I obviously get to watch a lot of Bengals games. I just wasn't the biggest Andy Dalton fan. So I think Darnold can be better than our prime Andy Dalton, but I'm kind of with Joel on this. I just don't see what other people are seeing. They always talk about, oh, the situation is so bad. He'd be so much better somewhere else. And I'm like, you have to actually just watch how he plays. He makes terrible decisions. He's not that accurate. So I don't think his ceiling is as high as most people think. So I'm kind of with Joel on that. And I do think that he could become a starting quarterback somewhere else. But I think there's a difference between a franchise quarterback and a starting quarterback. I think Teddy Bridgewater is a starting quarterback, but I don't think that he's a franchise quarterback. I don't ever see Sam Darnold being the guy that can go toe-to-toe with, a Mahomes, a Watson, a Rodgers, because honestly, Joel made a good point the other day. It's hard to win a Super Bowl with a game manager. You look at Jimmy Garoppolo. Jimmy Garoppolo with the 49ers last year, he had all the talent around him, but he just couldn't get it done. they tried to hide Jimmy G all year, but when it was time for him to make throws, he couldn't make them. And I think that honestly, Sam Darnold, that's about his ceiling, being a Jimmy Garoppolo type quarterback. You know what I'm saying?
And that's even if, because Jimmy Garoppolo is, even though I'm not high on him, I think he is a little bit underrated because people think he's like totally not that good. But, you know, I don't, Jack mentioned the Colts, but in all honesty, are we sure that Darnold has more talent or potential than Jacob Eason? I mean, he drafted him in the second round. He has a cannon for an arm.
I actually liked Eason coming out of college. I didn't love him, but I thought he was underrated. You know, if he would have got taken like late first round, I wouldn't have been mad at the team because, like you said, he's not a kid. And I think that if he actually develops, he could become good behind Phillip Rivers, man. But yeah, I think that a lot of people kind of see Tua and Sam Darnold the same way. I know Tua's off to a pretty good start. He's winning games with the Dolphins, but I just don't see what other people see with Tua and Sam Darnold. You know, people tried to anoint Tua as the next Russell Wilson, this next great quarterback when he was at Alabama. Listen, he had a good career at Alabama, but again, I don't see what other people see. I think Tua has an average arm. I don't think he's all that athletic. He's constantly been injured, you know, throughout his career. And that's another thing with Darnold. Darnold's been injured a little bit throughout his time with the Jets. So, well, what do you guys think about Tua? You know, am I missing something with Tua?
I think Tua is a game manager. I think I said it all in the video that I don't see anything special in Tua.
For me,
yeah, I kind of agree.
For me, like, I personally think that I want to give him a little bit more time before I say it. From what we've seen on him, all we've seen from him is game management. He's had one drive where he really impressed me, and that was at the end of the Cardinals game. But I want to see a year of him at least before we make that decision, because I think that his circumstances coming into the league weren't perfect. I think he got thrown into the fire a little bit, and they've kind of tried to baby him into this offense. So I'd like to see him for a year before I say he's just a game manager. But I think that if I had to bet right now based on what I've seen and that's it, I would say all he's shown is game manager.
Yeah, and one last thing before I get off the phone, I'm not going to really time in on this because I think you guys want to get to the callers, but where would you rank Dak Prescott amongst quarterbacks right now? I think a lot of Dallas Cowboys fans, you know, they tend to overrate Dak Prescott a little bit. I think Dak's a good quarterback, and I think that he's actually a franchise quarterback, maybe a lower tier franchise quarterback. But do you think Dak's a top 10 quarterback or not? I'm gonna actually say he's not. I think he's right outside the top 10. It's not crazy to call him a top 10 quarterback, but what do you guys think?
I think he's top 15 for sure. I think top 10 on his best day, he cracks that. But I think he's top 15 for sure.
Yeah, and I would say the same thing. I think he's definitely top 15. I think that if he didn't get hurt and he was able to play this whole season and keep playing at the level he was playing at, he might have eked into the top 10 by now. I would not have him in the top 10 right now, but he would probably be 11 or 12, like one of the first quarterbacks out of the top 10. I think that depending on who you talk to, he's either overrated or underrated. I don't think that because he plays for the Cowboys, and the Cowboys are such an either love or hate team that people either hate Dak Prescott or love Dak Prescott. But I have him right in the middle of the road. I think he's an above average quarterback, a little bit above 15, but below 10.
I actually 100% agree. But yeah, guys, I'm going to let you guys get some more callers. Keep doing your thing on Pick a Side, man.
All right. Thank you, man. We appreciate you. And thank you for the donation once again.
Yeah. Thank you much for calling in the donation. It means a lot to us, and we really appreciate it.
Yeah, no problem. No problem.
All right. Have a good night. All right. So we're actually Run Left said, can we recall? That was going to be our last call of the night because the semester's about to end in school. We got a ton of schoolwork to do. We got a ton of editing for these segments to do. Our next episode is probably going to be on Wednesday or Thursday. It's going to be our basketball show. So you guys tune into that. We appreciate everybody that was in this live. And guys, just thank you. Thank you for supporting. We really appreciate it.
We still got 18 people in here right now. It's pretty crazy that you stuck with us the whole episode. But thank you guys very much for watching. We really appreciate it. And we can't wait to see you next time.